Warrior Lore. Chapter 2786. Yes, Li Zongbao was able to hit each of the 6 illusory swords. If he really used the immortal piercing whip on one of the illusory swords, then what would happen? If there was only one illusory sword, it would be fine. But now, there were 6 of them. Who could guarantee that the others would not spread the news? If that happened, the one who was hit by the immortal piercing whip would lose a lot of face. Although the illusory swordsmen were criticizing the Taoist sect cultivators for being sanctimonious, when it came to their face, they had to be mindful of it. After all, they were illusory sword grade 3 swordsmen. Seeing Zhuo Jian flying away, Wang Zhengqiang and the rest looked at each other and did not dare to delay. Like before, they fanned out and chased after him. While they were chasing, they were also communicating with each other, as if they were discussing something. Unfortunately, after chasing for half a day, the 6 of them did not increase their speed. Even though the flowing cloud airship did not hide like Xiaohua, they still maintained a certain distance from the airship. After all, the immortal piercing whip was not comparable to the innate primordial water or the divine sword mystic technique. There was only one of it. Whoever made the first move would get it. But who would make the first move? This was a bigger problem than the immortal piercing whip. Furthermore, the flowing cloud flying ship could not escape from their grasp. Even if they chased after Xiaohua like this, they could still fish him out. They could only focus on maintaining the current situation. The flowing cloud airship was covered by the innate primordial water, so the 6 illusory swordsmen could not see the situation on the airship. Among the 3 of them, besides Xiao Mao, Li Zongbao and Fairy Hongxia were both injured. Not to mention Fairy Hongxia, her phoenix celestial body was destroyed by the 2 illusory swords, and her bloodline was severely damaged. Not to mention using her dermic powers to cast spells, it was not easy for her to even sit cross-legged on the airship. Looking at Li Zongbao, he was also sitting there listlessly. His face was pale, and his dermic powers were exhausted. Senior brother, Fairy Hongxia tried her best to activate her dermic body and maintain the innate primordial water to defend against the attacks of the illusory swords. She said weakly, "Your immortal slaying whip is not complete yet. Why do you have to use it? If I don't use it today, when will I?" Li Zongbao replied indifferently, "Do you want me to fall before you use it?" Then, he looked at the immortal slaying whip in his hand and smirked, "But this thing is really impressive. With my magic power, I can only use it once. If these illusory swords knew about this, I wonder what they would think. It's a spiritual weapon after all. How can an ordinary magic treasure compare to the amount of magic power it requires?" Xiao Mao also sighed and said, "Moreover, Senior Brother Li is forcefully activating an incomplete spirit artifact. I'm afraid that it will cause some damage to this spirit artifact, right?" Li Zongbao's mind was connected to the spiritual artifact, so he could naturally sense the wild and violent nature of the spiritual artifact that had not been completely nurtured. However, he glanced at Xiao Mao and did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Where are those illusory swords? Why haven't they attacked after such a long time?" "They are only following outside the flying ship. They did not attack. They did not even close the distance." Fairy Hongxia said in a low voice, "Humph, a bunch of greedy old farts." Li Zongbao understood immediately. He snorted and said, "They must be thinking of a way to take away my immortal slaying whip." Fairy Hongxia was stunned for a moment. Then, she understood and smiled bitterly in her heart. She did not expect that Li Zongbao's rash use of the immortal slaying whip would cause the 6 illusory swords to be suspicious of each other, resulting in a stalemate. It saved the 3 of them from dying on the spot. This stalemate will not last long. Fairy Hongxia said in a low voice, Let's hold on for as long as we can." Li Zongbao said calmly, "As for our countermeasure, I'm afraid we can only rely on Xiao Mao to activate the flying ship." "Sigh, that's true." Fairy Hongxia had already predicted this trip to Mount Million Ming. However, she did not expect that they would end up like this before they could even reach the border of Mount Million Ming. Therefore, she also understood why no one from the Kai family of Qingyang had been able to go to Mount Million Ming and find the ancestral shrine of the Kai family. Unknowingly, a few days had passed. Xiao Mao, who had been controlling the flying ship, could not hold on any longer. On the other hand, Fairy Hong Xia and Li Zongbao's injuries had recovered somewhat. This was because with the protection of the innate primordial water, Fairy Hong Xia's empty fort strategy had not changed. Zuojian and the rest had seen through it. However, Zuojian and the rest were patient. The six of them discussed for a while and had come to a temporary conclusion. Xiang Mufeng of the Drifting Cloud Sword Manor activated his sword radiance and caught up with the flying ship. With a wave of his hand, a cloud-like sword will rushed out and entered the innate primordial water. With a loud bang, a series of ripples appeared on the innate primordial water that was flowing peacefully. Then, a crack appeared on the primordial water, and a yellow shadow of a whip flew out. Xiang Mufeng's face lit up with joy. The sword radiance around him shone brightly. Thousands of small swords shimmering in white light surrounded him like wisps of smoke. With a muffled sound, the shadow of the immortal slaying whip landed on the sword shadow. It was very faint and did not make any special sound. Oh! Xiang Mufeng was a little stunned. He thought to himself, could it be, just as Wujian said, that the Dharma power consumed by this magic treasure is not something that a foundation-building cultivator can support? Is Li Zongbao only strong on the outside but weak on the inside? However, just as this thought appeared in his mind, there was a loud roar that sounded like the roar of a dragon or a tiger. The shadow of the whip that landed on the sword radiance suddenly seemed to have come to life. The shadow of the whip suddenly expanded and even twisted like a yellow python and plunged into the shadow of the sword. The head of the shadow of the whip directly hit Xiang Mufeng's sword armor. The tail of the shadow of the whip even smashed the shadow of the sword into pieces. Oh no! When Xiang Mufeng saw that the shadow of the whip was close to him, he did not dare to hesitate anymore. The sword origin in his body quickly flowed out. His entire body gradually became transparent, and a giant sword appeared. Boom! As soon as the giant sword appeared, the shadow of the immortal slaying whip hit the giant sword. The sword radiance on the giant sword flickered slightly, and the shadow of the whip was smashed into pieces and fell into the air. Buzz! The giant sword made a slight sound, and Xiang Mufeng slowly returned to his human form. However, there was a hint of seriousness on his face. He was not as happy as he was when he blocked the immortal slaying whip. Fellow swordsman Xiang, how is it? The power of this immortal slaying whip. Zuojian flew over from behind and asked loudly, That's right. It is indeed a supreme-grade magic treasure. Xiang Mufeng nodded and said, It even has the meaning of a legendary spiritual artifact. The shadow of the immortal slaying whip can actually identify the flaws in my sword will. If this magic treasure does not have a spirit, then Li Zongbao would be able to see through it. This Li Zongbao is also quite a character, Zuojian said calmly as he raised his head and looked at the flying ship that was escaping in a panic. That's right. After all, the three of them were heroes in the Great War of Dao and Sword. If they did not have some tricks up their sleeves, how would they dare to come to my sword realm to train? Wang Zhengqiang said coldly, Moreover, that terrifying phoenix, which is even more powerful, actually colluded with the three of them to attack my sword realm illusory sword. If we don't kill them here, where will our dignity go? But it's been so many days, and that terrifying phoenix still hasn't shown up. Pu Changfeng of the Flat Mountain Sword School also said somewhat anxiously, Junior brother Sikong Yu of my humble sect died at his hands. If I don't kill Xiaohua, I'm afraid I won't have the face to return to the mountains and become a senior of the Flat Mountain Sword School. Since things have come to this, there's no need for us to say anything more. Zhou Zhou of the Thousand Leaves Sword Sect gritted his teeth and said, Let's just kill him. As for who will take the immortal slaying whip, it won't be too late to decide after Li Zongbao dies. Looks like that's the only way. Zuojian smiled bitterly. The six of them had discussed this matter many times, but no one was satisfied with the result. If other sword friends come, it'll be even harder to deal with them. We'll do as you say, sword friends Hua. Huang Ping of the Lunar Sun Sword Sect raised her eyes and looked at the towering and dangerous peak several dozen li away from the flying boat. She said, This sword will head to the sword peak and intercept the flying boat from the front. Let's settle this matter there. Good. We'll do as you say, sword friend Huang. Zuojian looked at everyone. Wang Zhengqiang and the others nodded. So he clapped his hands and said, as for who the immortal slaying whip belongs to, we can discuss it after these three die. Since everyone had come to an agreement, they all stepped on their flying swords and flew towards the flowing cloud-flying ship, not showing any mercy. It seemed like they wanted to kill the three of them here. Not to mention that Fairy Hong Xia had already fallen into a dangerous situation and was about to be killed by 6th grade 3 illusory swordsmen on the sword arrowhead peak. The lost Xiaohua was like a headless fly, flying in all directions, trying to find a sword cultivator to ask for directions. However, after flying for a long time, Xiaohua did not notice that the scenery around him had already changed. The ice field that was everywhere had gradually become less and more ripples appeared. The icebergs above the ripples had also become much smaller. Although there was no green vegetation, gray nameless thorns appeared in his field of vision. Although there were not many of these thorns, they still changed the pure white color of the ice field. Damn it, can someone come out? Xiaohua scratched his ears and cheeks, constantly releasing his divine sense to search. At the same time, he thought anxiously, hasn't my luck always been excellent? Today. But just as this thought appeared in his mind, he was dumbfounded. He could not help but be dumbfounded. About 100 kilometers in front of him, he scanned with his divine sense and saw a swordsman. However, it was not just one swordsman, but many. So many that when Xiaohua scanned with his divine sense, he could not see how many there were. Are these sword cultivators here to kill me? This was the first thought that came to Xiaohua's mind. However, when Xiaohua switched to using his Buddhist sense and secretly peeked, he found that these swordsmen had their backs facing him. Moreover, there was a faint fluctuation of sword light in front of the swordsmen, like a sword array. It seemed like they were hiding their tracks. There was no sign of them chasing after him. -11. Chapter 2787. Moreover, most of these swordsmen were disciples of the drawing sword sect. Only a small portion of them were disciples of the 1st or 2nd grade of the illusory sword sect. How could they be here to kill him? This is strange. What are these swordsmen doing? Since I have to find someone to ask, I might as well go and take a look. Xiaohua thought. His eyes turned, and he withdrew the Imperial Thunder Transformation's lightning escape technique. He quietly changed it to wind escape technique, and used the Devil Realm's concealment technique to stealthily approach those ambushing sword cultivators. However, before he could get close to those swordsmen, he saw that the swordsmen's bodies suddenly flashed with sword light. They all flew out from their hiding places and flew up into the sky like a swarm of locusts. Damn it, I'm afraid. There are tens of thousands of people. Xiaohua was somewhat dumbstruck. They are fighting against my Dao sect cultivators? My Dao sect cultivators, when did they advance to this place? When Xiaohua sensed the scene, he unconsciously stood in the air. His eyes stared straight ahead, and he muttered, my goodness, why are there so many people? Who should I ask for directions? Of course, right in front of Xiaohua, there was a large plain. Although the plain was covered in snow, it was already different from the rest of Huan country. The snow was not frozen solid. Instead, it was similar to the snow that Xiaohua had seen before. It was somewhat like cotton wool, fluffy and piled up on the ground. When one stepped on it, mud and snow would definitely splash up. It was no longer the solid ice of Huan country. Looking at the snowy plain again, there were actually two groups of people preparing to fight to the death. The ones closest to Xiaohua, needless to say, were the tens of thousands of swordsmen who were lying in ambush just now. However, the ones confronting these tens of thousands of swordsmen were not the Dao sect cultivators that Xiaohua had imagined. Instead, it was a group of people who not only dressed strangely, but also had a somewhat different appearance. These people who made Xiaohua dumbfounded. There were probably tens of thousands of them. These people were all dark, thin, and short. Every one of them had strange patterns engraved on their bodies. Some of these patterns were like beasts, some were like birds, and some were like ferocious ghost faces and white ghastly holes. Looking at the attire of these people, It could be said that there were all kinds of strange things. Some only used some leaves to wrap around their waists, some used vines to wrap around their necks, and some even used something that looked like leaves to wrap around their heads. In short, none of them were wearing proper clothes, and none of them were wearing a complete robe. Looking at the hands of these people, they didn't have any flying swords, nor did they have any artifacts or treasures that Xiao Hua was familiar with. However, they weren't empty-handed either. Some of them were holding long white bones that had been polished until they were shiny and sharp. Some of them were holding several human skulls that were strung together. Each skull was painted with a strange color. There were even some people who were holding pieces of wood that had been carved. Some looked like snakes, while others looked like toads. These dark, thin people holding strange weapons were not standing on the ground, nor were they floating in the air. Instead, they were riding on the backs of strange spirit beasts. These spirit beasts were of different sizes. The small ones were about half a zhang in size, with jagged bones and flesh, and the big ones were several zhang in size, with huge bodies. However, no matter the size of the spirit beasts, each and every one of them was abnormally fierce. Each and every one of them roared with all their strength in place. If not for the restraints of the masters on their backs, they would have already rushed out. At this time, the sword cultivator had already flown into the air. With a flash of sword light, he had already launched an attack. But these dark, thin people did not seem to care at all, coldly watching. When they were about 100 zhang away from them, a strange sound came from somewhere among them. This sound was like the cry of cicadas, but also like the hiss of beasts, piercing straight into the horizon. Boom, boom. As soon as the sound was heard, all the spirit beasts began to run. The loud noise immediately drowned out the sound of the command. The entire ground began to shake. The snow and mud mixed together and splashed high into the air. Wah wah wah. A similarly strange sound came from the mouths of the people on the spirit beasts. This sound had a strange rhythm. These people, are they stupid? Xiao Hua stood blankly in the air, still muttering in a low voice, as if he had not woken up from the shock just now. They don't have any magic tools or flying swords. How can they fight against the sword cultivators who are attacking that side? But obviously, these dark, thin people were not idiots. Even the several tens of thousands of sword cultivators were somewhat afraid of these strange people riding on the backs of spirit beasts. The swordsmen did not want to form a sword formation like the cultivators, but rather arrange themselves in a neat formation, attacking from three sides. Not a single swordsman stepped out of the formation. Buzz buzz, the flying swords of the several tens of thousands of swordsmen could not be underestimated. The sword lights were almost connected into one, like the rising tide of the sea, slowly and courageously rushing toward the tide of spirit beasts. Woo-woo-woo, way-woo-woo. A strange sound with an obscure rhythm rang out. In the tide of spirit beasts, the several tens of thousands of dark, thin people opened their mouths at the same time. This sound was noisy at first, like the buzzing of bees, but then it gradually echoed, as if the same person was singing. Finally, just before the swordsmen came into contact with them, layers of faint green brilliance emerged from the tide of spirit beasts. Soul cultivators. These are soul cultivators. Seeing this scene, how could Xiao Hua, who practiced soul cultivation techniques, not see it? These several tens of thousands of dark, thin people were none other than the mysterious soul cultivators of Meng Mountain. Why did they run into the Han country? To fight against sword cultivators? Although Xiao Hua had made countless guesses about the appearance of soul cultivators, and even imagined many scenarios of meeting soul cultivators, he did not expect this kind of soul cultivator to be like this. How could he ever have guessed that soul cultivators would be like this? Furthermore, he had encountered soul cultivators much earlier than he had expected. While Xiao Hua was still in shock, the beast tide of soul cultivators had already collided with the sword cultivators. The faint green brilliance caused by the chanting of soul cultivators grew thicker and thicker. Like strands of tentacles, it penetrated deep into the sword formation of the sword cultivators. When the sword cultivators touched the faint green brilliance, the sword lights on their bodies were annihilated, and they fell from the sky with their eyes closed. When their corpses fell to the ground, many of them were trampled by the spirit beasts of soul cultivators. Some of them had their bones and flesh broken, and some of them had their blood splattered everywhere. For a moment, they were mixed with the snow and mud. Looking again, many of the swordsmen's sword lights had also pierced into the faint green brilliance, and the sword lights around these swordsmen had also blocked the corrosion of the faint green brilliance. All of the sword lights were aimed precisely at the soul cultivator's forehead, right in between his eyebrows. But as soon as the sword lights got close to the soul cultivator, roar could be heard coming from the spirit beasts beneath the soul cultivator. From their mouths, noses, and feet, different colored lights could be seen shooting out from their mouths, noses, and feet to block the sword lights with a ding-ding-dang-dang sound. Just like that, the incomparably sharp flying sword of the soul cultivator was blocked by the spirit beasts. While chanting, the soul cultivator swung the sword in his hand. A strange wave of energy came out from the soul armament to attack the sword cultivator. Bzzz, some of the swordsmen were able to defend against the soul cultivator's attack, while others were unable to defend against the soul cultivator's attack. Some of the swordsmen were forced to retreat, while others fell from the sky as if they had lost consciousness. Of course, there were also powerful sword cultivators who managed to break through the soul cultivator's defense. Their sword lights were like lightning, and their sword lights were like rainbows as they pierced through the soul cultivator's forehead and killed him on top of his spirit beast. But strangely enough, the spirit beasts didn't break free from the soul cultivator's control because of the soul cultivator's death. Instead, they let out mournful howls, withered to the ground, and slowly lost their life force. Then, they launched their final attack and died under the sword cultivator's sword. Not a single one of them survived. The entire battlefield was filled with the sounds of battle, and the chanting of the soul cultivator grew louder and louder. Even though Xiao Hua was hidden in the distance, his forehead was still slightly swollen and trembling. It was even a little hot. So this is how soul cultivators fight. Xiao Hua was afraid of being discovered by the soul cultivators and sword cultivators, so he didn't dare to release his divine will and Buddhist awareness. Instead, he used the demon realm's concealment technique to hide in midair. As he observed carefully, he couldn't help but think to himself, this soul cultivator's technique is really mysterious. Even though this young master has cultivated the art of soul cultivation to the level of pure spirit heaven, I'm still confused. I don't know if this soul cultivator is using soul threads or just relying on soul items. However, from now on, this young master somewhat understood that the physique of a soul cultivator is not as strong as that of a sword cultivator, and they don't have as many offensive techniques as the cultivators of my Dao sect. They also need to rely on the strength of spirit beasts to defend themselves. In fact, the life and death of these spirit beasts are tied together with the life and death of the soul cultivator. But why don't these swordsmen form a powerful sword formation? Aren't the yin-yang sword formation and the 5 elements splitting edge sword formation extremely powerful? Also, these sword cultivators, aren't they too ostentatious? The battle between them and my Dao sect hasn't ended yet, and they've provoked the soul cultivators here. How many swordsmen do they have in Huan Kingdom? Can they resist the pincer attack of the Dao sect and millions of Ming Mountains? While Xiao Hua was lost in thought, the battle raged on. Swordsmen fell one after another, and the dark and skinny soul cultivators fell as well. Sword cultivators and soul cultivators were tangled up in a melee, and corpses were being tossed to the ground one after another. However, the dark green aura didn't decline. Instead, as the number of vengeful souls increased, it became even redder. Of course, the sword cultivators who could fight until now all had some tricks up their sleeves. The ordinary tricks of soul cultivators were useless and couldn't hurt their souls. Comparatively speaking, how could the soul cultivators be ordinary? They also had defensive techniques that could block the flying swords of the sword cultivators. Roughly 4 hours later, more than half of the tens of thousands of sword cultivators and soul cultivators had perished. The entire battle seemed to be in a stalemate. Coo-coo, the ear-piercing cry of a bird pierced Xiao Hua's ears like a sharp sword. It was a very strange sound. Xiao Hua's body trembled, and he nearly broke free from his concealment technique. When he turned his head to look at the source of the sound, he was even more shocked. -11. Chapter 2788. Behind the soul cultivator, there was a dense swarm of spirit fowl flying through the air. These spirit fowl were vastly different from the spirit fowl of the Tao school. Not only were their feathers not as bright and colorful, their bodies weren't as light either. The spirit fowl in front was roughly 30 meters long. The 80-meter-long body was as thick as a mountain and covered in dense patterns. Some of the patterns looked like eyes, some looked like skeletons, and there were even some that looked like corpses dripping with blood. The front of the spirit fowl had a small head that was flat and a tail that was about 20 meters long. The wings on the back of the spirit fowl were several meters long and shone with a grayish-black light. On top of the spirit fowl was a skinny soul warrior. He wore simple black armor and held a trident in his hand that was about a meter long. The soul warrior's eyes shone brightly. Even though the armor covered his face, Xiao Hua could still see the sharpness in his eyes. Behind the soul warrior were 100 or so other soul warriors. Their spirit fowl couldn't compare to the spirit fowl of the soul warrior in front, but they were still several meters long and had different patterns on them. Outside of the soul warrior's armor, his bare skin was covered in strange black and white patterns, just like the previous soul warriors. Behind them were several tens of thousands of soul warriors. They weren't wearing any armor. Aside from the spirit fowl they rode, they were all similar to the soul warriors fighting on the ground. That ear-piercing shriek came from the spirit bird at the front. The spirit bird's sharp gaze swept across the battlefield, and it let out a few goo-goo sounds. In an instant, the entire group of spirit birds became noisy. They did not even need the leader at the front to give the order, and they all swooped down. Whiz-whiz. The sword cultivators on the ground were terrified by the approach of the soul cultivators. Their swords let out a mournful wail as they flew up into the air, circled around in midair, and then charged in the opposite direction of the soul cultivators, disregarding everything else. As for the soul cultivators' spirit beasts, they were enormous in size, but also incredibly fast. Hundreds of spirit beasts led the charge, causing the air to tremble as they flew across the battlefield in pursuit of the soul cultivators. More and more swordsmen fell to the soul warriors' soul armaments and spirit beasts. The entire army of swordsmen was completely defeated, and the remaining tens of thousands of swordsmen fled in panic. All the soul warriors, regardless of whether they were on the ground or in the air, had to chase after them. Woo-woo. An extremely cheerful cry came out from the spirit warrior's mouth. All of the soul cultivators stopped what they were doing, and all of the soul warriors began to cheer. Then, all of the soul warriors landed on the ground and began to dance. It was almost as if they were celebrating. Xiaohua was very familiar with the way they danced. Wasn't it similar to the way the primordial spirit danced in the mysterious dark clouds? As for those spirit beasts, they were either dancing on the ground or dancing in the air. All of them were familiar with each other, and all of them cooperated harmoniously. Motherfucker. This is possible? Xiao Hua watched in disbelief as the limbs of these spirit warriors began to perform unimaginable movements. As the spirit warriors danced, their previously pale faces and even their shriveled bodies regained their vigor and vitality. Their bodies were also somewhat plump. I understand now, Xiao Hua suddenly realized. These soul cultivators need to use soul techniques in battle, and these soul warriors must have damaged their bodies. These soul cultivators are actually using the primordial spirit cultivation method on their bodies. This is a way to make up for the injuries they've suffered before. As expected, the green light that filled the battlefield had already dimmed. It seemed to have been absorbed by the soul cultivators and spirit beasts. The soul warriors rejoiced for at least an hour. Then, they cheered as they rushed into the mud and blood. They lifted up the bodies of the sword cultivators and swiftly cut off the heads. Then, they took the vines from their waists and strapped them to their chests. As for the bodies and storage bags, they placed them on the backs of the spirit beasts. For a moment, blood flowed out and dripped onto the bodies of the soul cultivators and spirit beasts. However, they simply turned a blind eye to it. Looking at their skillful selection and searching everywhere, Xiao Hua understood that these bodies were killed by the soul cultivators themselves. When everyone found the bodies of the swordsmen they had killed, they quietly looked at the soul cultivator in front of them. When the soul cultivator made a strange sound and raised his hand, everyone became even more frenzied. They were no longer as orderly as before. Instead, they began to snatch the bodies of the swordsmen. This time, not only were they snatching the bodies of the swordsmen, but they were also snatching the bodies of the soul cultivators and spirit beasts that had fallen. Alas, uncivilized people! A land of barbarians, Xiao Hua shook his head and sighed. No wonder the cultivators of my Tao sect, and even the swordsmen, don't put these millions of soul cultivators in their eyes. After the time it took to eat a meal, they saw that there was nothing but broken limbs, mud, and blood on the battlefield. Only then did all the soul cultivators regroup and slowly return to where they came from. Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry to show himself. Instead, he waited for the time it took to brew a cup of tea before he used the Devil World's concealment technique to fly towards the battlefield. He had just flown to a place a few dozen meters away from the battlefield when the smell of blood that soared to the sky filled his mouth and nose. Within this smell of blood that didn't disperse for a long time, there was even an incomparably vicious aura. Although Xiao Hua didn't release the Buddha Sarira, he could still deeply feel the anguished wails of the fallen souls on the battlefield. Alas, Xiao Hua sighed. Just as he was about to reveal himself and release the Buddha's Sarira, he suddenly frowned and a look of astonishment appeared on his face. Not far from where he was, he saw a woman with a slim figure flying toward him on a cloud. If he saw this woman anywhere else, Xiao Hua might not have paid attention to her. But this place had just experienced a great battle between sword cultivators and soul cultivators, and the smell of blood had yet to dissipate. How could he not be astonished when this woman appeared? However, when the woman flew closer, Xiao Hua unconsciously became a little absent-minded. The woman was in her early teens. Her delicate face was rosy and cute, and her eyes were as thin as the moon. Her two faint eyebrows hung above the crescent moon like a wisp of smoke. Coupled with her light red lips and small upturned nose, she was as elegant as an ink painting. Coupled with her two little braids, she was even prettier than the girls who walked out of the New Year's painting. If the woman's appearance was like this, then there was no need to talk about her figure. Her waist was as thin as a willow branch, and her upper body was dressed in a thin green robe. The slight bulge in front of her chest was a clear indication of her youthful beauty. As for the woman's lower body, she was dressed in a red dress. Under the dress, her snow-white calves were straight and delicate, and her bare ankles and feet were round and delicate. This woman was actually so alluring. Although she was still young, and there was still some immaturity between her eyebrows, in Xiao Hua's eyes, his heart couldn't help but be stirred. See, this woman is a little strange. Xiao Hua was absent-minded for a moment. Then he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air and hurriedly shifted his gaze away from the woman's body. However, the woman's slim figure and white feet were still swaying in front of his eyes. It's still a little strange. Xiao Hua regained his senses and suddenly came to a realization. After looking at her for a while, I only felt that this woman's eyes were full of spirit, but I actually didn't look carefully at her eyes. Sure enough, when Xiao Hua carefully looked at the woman's eyes again, those moon-like eyes were really like smoke. The eyes in her eyes seemed to be there, but not there. For a moment, it was an ordinary pitch-black color, and for a moment, it was like a misty deep pool. And as Xiao Hua focused his gaze seemed to be about to sink into the woman's eyes. See, Xiao Hua's mind was slightly blurred, and God's guidance operated vigilantly. Xiao Hua immediately came to his senses and hurriedly retracted his gaze, then sucked in a breath of cold air again. Strange, strange. Where did this woman come from? Xiao Hua secretly shouted. His heart was filled with doubts. This woman didn't realize that she was being spied on by Xiao Hua, and while jumping and jumping, she flew onto the battlefield. When she saw the cruelty of the battlefield, the woman's brows slightly wrinkled. She hesitated for a moment in midair, then she actually descended a bit, slowly flying on the battlefield. As she flew, her lips slightly moved, and her gaze scanned the surroundings, as if she was looking for something. About the time it took to smoke a cigarette, the woman roughly looked over the battlefield once, then flew up again with some disappointment, looking around. It should be here. I can't be wrong. But there's nothing here? The woman's voice was like a silver bell, and even more so like a clear spring gurgling out of a mountain rock, cool and refreshing to the ear. What is this girl looking for? Xiaohua couldn't help but feel anxious for her, wishing that he could help her find it. Come out. I can see you. The woman shouted towards a certain place, as if she was playing hide and seek with someone else. Xiaohua hid there, and couldn't help but smile. He had always been here, but he had never seen anyone else hiding there. How could he not know that this was the woman's bluff? If it was somewhere else, Xiaohua might have flown out and said a few words to this woman. But this place was Huan country, and a great battle had just happened. This woman suddenly appeared. Although she didn't have an inch of armor, and he couldn't see any special cultivation, who knew what this woman's background was? Of course, Xiaohua was almost certain that this woman was definitely not a sword cultivator. Nor was she a cultivator of the Dao sect, but was she a soul cultivator? Thinking about that ugly and barbaric soul cultivator just now, Xiaohua himself denied it. Were soul cultivators such beautiful people? -11. Chapter 2789. How could this girl, who was still a budding flower but was already so attractive, be an unenlightened person like Wan Shan and Ming Mountain? But this girl wasn't a swordsman, nor was she a cultivator or a soul warrior. Who could she be? If she was an ordinary woman, no one would believe that she would be able to wear thin clothes in the cold weather of the Huan Kingdom, not to mention that she would be able to come here on a cloud. Since he couldn't see her cultivation level, then it could be said that she was unfathomable. Even though Xiaohua didn't have any warning signs and didn't feel that this girl was a threat to him, he still didn't want to show himself. If worst comes to worst, I'll let her search here for half a day. If she doesn't see anyone, won't she leave? Although Xiaohua was somewhat anxious, he didn't dare to act rashly. He was really afraid that if he moved, he would be discovered by this strange girl. Unexpectedly, the girl circled around to the left and unexpectedly landed. She calmly sat down on a pile of snow and casually grabbed a clump of snow in her hand. Using a bit of strength, she squeezed it into a snowball. Looking left and right, she swung her arm and threw it out. Papa! It smashed into some gray vegetation on the snow. Immediately, the girl used her hand to support her cheek and lowered her head to look at the snow and mud. She seemed somewhat absent-minded. Seeing that the girl had actually sat there for half a day, Xiaohua somewhat couldn't bear it. He had no reason to accompany this girl who seemed to be playing here and wasting time for no reason. Since he couldn't ask for directions here, he might as well go somewhere else to look. Thinking, Xiaohua slightly moved and was about to use a concealment technique to leave. But just as he moved, the girl raised her head and looked at Xiaohua's location. She playfully said, "I see you. Quickly come out." The girl raised her face and smiled like a flower. It was a kind of smile that came from the heart. "I've been waiting for you for so long. You actually didn't come out to see me? Are you willing to let me wait for you in this world of ice and snow?" Xiaohua sighed, knowing that he was still discovered by this girl. His figure flashed in midair, and he touched his nose and said with a bitter smile, "Little girl, the person you're looking for isn't here. I've already stopped here for half a day. Besides the soul cultivator and swordsman who were fighting just now, no one else has come. If you want to find someone, you should go somewhere else." "How did you know that I was looking for someone else?" The girl stood up, tilted her head, and looked at Xiaohua. She smiled and said, "Why am I not looking for you?" Are you looking for me?" Xiaohua was greatly surprised. "You and I have never met before. Why are you looking for me?" "Don't ask me why I'm looking for you." The girl chuckled. "Let me ask you first, are you looking for someone?" That's right. How do you know I'm looking for someone?" Xiaohua asked curiously. "But aren't you looking for someone too?" Don't ask me how I know you're looking for someone. I only know that I know you're looking for someone, just like how I know I'm looking for you. Moreover, I can only find you here." Although these words were extremely difficult to pronounce, this girl's words were very catchy and pleasant to listen to. Well, since you know I'm looking for someone, then tell me where the person I'm looking for is. Xiaohua said helplessly then, tell me why you're looking for me. The girl tilted her head slightly and said with a smile, my name is Juxia, what's your name? My name is Xiaohua. Xiaohua did not hide anything and replied, Xiaohua? Strange. Why are you called Xiaohua? Hearing Xiaohua's name, Juxia was a little surprised. After thinking for a moment, she asked, other than Xiaohua, do you have any other names? Oh. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat and asked curiously, what do you think my name should be? He, looks like you're really called Xiaohua. Juxia giggled and said, but why did you, a Dao Sect's Jindan stage cultivator, run to the sword domain? At this time, isn't the battle between the Dao sect and the sword cultivators going on in the Sky Patrol City? Aren't I looking for someone? Xiaohua also smiled slightly. Nothing is more important than looking for someone. Don't you think so? Right. Looking for someone is the most important thing, Juxia said with a smile. Although I am Xiaohua and don't have any other names, but can you tell me where the person I'm looking for is? Xiaohua asked. Unfortunately, Juxia shook her head slightly. Where is the person you're looking for? I don't know, but I know where you should go. Where to? Xiaohua asked. Sword Peak. Juxia replied without hesitation. Oh, Sword Peak? Where is that? Xiaohua was slightly stunned and asked, is it near the Flowing Cloud Lake? Flowing Cloud Lake? Juxia thought for a moment, then shook her head. The Flowing Cloud Lake is a place at the border between the Million Ming Mountains and the Sword Domain. But the Sword Peak is within the Sword Domain, and the two are in different directions. In which direction is the Flowing Cloud Lake? Xiaohua asked. Unfortunately, at this point, Juxia did not answer, and instead asked, don't you want to know why I'm looking for you? Yes. Xiaohua answered without hesitation. But I want to know where the Flowing Cloud Lake is even more. Actually, I want to ask you for a favor. Juxia hesitated slightly, however. I know that if I say it now, you will definitely refuse, so I can't tell you right now. Strange, you didn't say that I know if I can help you? If you want me to help you, you must tell me first. Xiaohua was even more puzzled. But Juxia still shook her head. You don't have to ask this. I naturally know that you will refuse once I say it. Forget it. Tell me where the Flowing Cloud Lake is. Xiaohua said helplessly. You don't have to go to the Flowing Cloud Lake. You can go directly to the Sword Peak. Juxia did not tell Xiaohua the location of the Flowing Cloud Lake. Why should I listen to you? Xiaohua looked up and down at Juxia. If you don't tell me the direction of the Flowing Cloud Lake, I can go to other places to ask. This is the battlefield of sword cultivators and soul cultivators. Juxia said with a smile. I'm afraid you can't understand the words of soul cultivators. And sword cultivators are all in groups. You, a cultivator of the Dao sect, want to ask for directions. I'm afraid it won't be easy, right? Humph, don't worry about that. Xiaohua snorted coldly. You should have a way to ask. Juxia was not angry and said indifferently, but if you go to the Flowing Cloud Lake, then your beloved will lose her life. Only if you go to the Sword Peak and bring me along will your beloved be able to live. Do you believe it? Are you willing to bet? Why would I bet with you for no reason? Xiaohua was happy. Since you know everything, what else do you want to bet with me? Juxia smiled slightly, with a face full of pride, and said, actually, I only know that I can find someone here. He can help me a lot, and I also know where to go next. As for the rest, it's all my own guesses. You guessed it yourself? Xiaohua was stunned. You said it so well, I thought you knew. But how did you know? Without waiting for Xiaohua to finish speaking, Juxia interrupted him and said, you, a cultivator of the Dao sect, actually took the risk of a great sword battle to accompany this person to the sword domain, and even went so deep. I'm afraid everyone knows about the dangers involved, right? Tell me, if it was just a normal friendship, would you take such a huge risk? Xiaohua laughed bitterly again, and couldn't help but rub his nose again. He was somewhat at a loss for words, and his previous abnormal vigilance had also relaxed a little. Although the true essence around his body was circulating from time to time, guarding against Zhu Xia's sneak attack at any time, Xiao Hua really believed that she didn't have any ill intentions. You don't have to let your guard down like this. It's better to circulate the true essence protecting your body, Zhu Xia said mischievously. Who knows if I have any ulterior motives towards you? Xiao Hua's mind moved, and his true essence slightly slackened. Zhu Xia sensed it and said with a sharp mind, You. Xiao Hua was helpless. This Zhu Xia was indeed very sensitive, as if she knew the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and even the movements of other people like the back of her hand. However, this sensitivity, when compared to her exquisite heart aperture, was extremely inferior. It was as if she could completely guess his thoughts with just a single sentence. However, don't worry, I still need to ask you for help, so how could I attack you? Zhu Xia said again, moreover, I can't see through your cultivation. If you want to escape, I definitely won't be able to catch up to you. Xiao Hua saw that Zhu Xia was so confident, and just as he was about to say something, she didn't give him the time or opportunity to do so, and continued, moreover, when you saw me, you were only slightly absent-minded, and your mind wasn't lost at all. Either you practiced a secret technique, or you have a beloved Tao companion in your heart. For a young cultivator like you with a profound cultivation, the female cultivators chasing after you are like moths to a flame. Xiao Hua opened his mouth again. Shu. Zhu Xia stretched out her index finger and placed it on her lips. This action caused Xiao Hua's heart to jump, and he couldn't help but stop talking, as if he was afraid of destroying the beauty within. Wait for me to finish speaking. That kind of coquettishness was very natural, but it was also extremely seductive and infectious. Xiao Hua looked at her in a daze and didn't say anything else. Zhu Xia was very satisfied and said again, rather than believe that you practiced a secret technique, it's better to believe that you already have a beloved Tao companion in your heart. Moreover, you wanted to ask me for directions as soon as we met, so naturally, you're burning with impatience to find her. If it wasn't for your beloved, would you prepare to leave this place in such a hurry? You don't even want to say a few more words to me? Ordinary people have an old saying, as long as there are 3 reasons to do something, then it should be done. I can find so many reasons for this matter. So do you think I'm still not sure? -11. Chapter 2790. You are really too smart. Xiao Hua helplessly nodded his head. He shifted his gaze away from Zhu Xia's beautiful face, which was inferior to her intelligence. He muttered, although what you said is not correct, but your guess is correct. Where did I guess wrong? Zhu Xia asked in disbelief. No need. You don't know everything. Being able to guess the result is already very good. Xiao Hua was powerless to argue with her. He waved his hand and said, Since you already know that I am going to find my lover, then quickly tell me what I can help you with so that I can go to Flowing Cloud Lake. Zhu Xia shook her head and said, You are wrong. Didn't I just say it? If I say it now, you definitely won't help me. Why should I say it? Secondly, you definitely can't go to Flowing Cloud Lake. You are going to Sword Edge Peak. Moreover, when you go to Sword Edge Peak, you should also bring me along. Bring you along? Xiao Hua was really puzzled. He looked at the exceptionally intelligent and mysterious Zhu Xia and said, I don't even know who you are, let alone where you came from. Why should I bring you along? My name is Zhu Xia. Didn't I just say it? Zhu Xia mischievously said, As for where I come from, is that important? Moreover, I am only following you to see what you can help me with. When I am able to ask you for help, I will ask you for help. So, you still don't know what you need my help with. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Yes. Zhu Xia slyly replied. I didn't promise to help you. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand. What a joke. Even this mysterious Zhu Xia couldn't do it. How could he do it? He definitely couldn't agree to such a difficult task. You will definitely agree. Zhu Xia confidently replied. Impossible. Xiao Hua shook his head like a rattle drum. Unexpectedly, Zhu Xia didn't argue with him like before. Instead, she smiled and said, It's okay. If you are not willing to help when I ask you for help, Then just pretend that I didn't say anything. Just pretend that you've never seen me alone. Xiaohua had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Hearing this girl's pitiful words, he hesitated and wanted to say something. Juxia flew up first and said, "Let's go. Just now, we could dawdle for a while to dispel your suspicions. But now, we have to go. If you don't go now, your lover will be in trouble." "You're going too?" Xiaohua helplessly asked. "You just need to point in the direction of Flowing Cloud Lake." "Not only me, but the place we're going to isn't Flowing Cloud Lake either." Juxia corrected him again, but this time, he spat out. "The Sword Edge Peak is a part of the Sword Domain, and it only takes a few days to reach there. The Flowing Cloud Lake is far, and you won't be able to reach there in less than 10 days. Could it be that you want to give up what's close at hand and seek what's far away?" "All right." Hearing that the Sword Edge Peak wasn't far, Xiaohua agreed. If he didn't meet Fairy Hongxia and the others at the Sword Edge Peak, he could still speed up and reach the Flowing Cloud Lake. Looking at Juxia's mysterious appearance, if Fairy Hongxia really went to the Sword Edge Peak because of some accident and he didn't go to rescue her, wouldn't he regret it for the rest of his life? However, seeing that Juxia didn't turn back, it was as if she already knew that he had to go with her. Forget it. Xiaohua didn't have any countermeasures to deal with this seemingly harmless girl. He sighed and followed her. "Oh, you. Is this the lightning evasion technique? It's actually so powerful." Seeing Xiaohua using the lightning evasion technique to chase after her, Juxia was somewhat astonished. I am a disciple of the Imperial Lightning Sect in the country of Shi. Naturally, I know the lightning evasion technique. This wasn't considered a secret, so Xiaohua didn't hesitate to answer. "That is really strange." Juxia didn't feel relieved because of Xiaohua's answer. Instead, she was somewhat puzzled and slightly frowned. This frown of Juxia's seemed to be a casual action, but it was filled with endless charm. It actually made Xiaohua's heart ache slightly. I finally understand." Xiaohua hurriedly shifted his gaze away and sighed. "This Juxia isn't too beautiful. It's just that her aura is truly superhuman. Moreover, there's a natural charm on top of her aura. This charm seeps into her bones and makes people involuntarily feel pity for her." After flying for a few days, seeing Juxia constantly changing directions and not flying directly towards the sun, Xiaohua was somewhat bewildered. He couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you flying directly towards the Sword Edge Peak? Why? Why do you keep changing directions?" "Change directions?" Juxia was somewhat stunned. "When did I change directions? I've always been flying towards the Sword Edge Peak." Xiaohua pointed at the sun and said, "In these few days, you've already deviated from the sun several times." "The sun's direction?" Juxia was even more shocked. She raised her head to look at the sun, and then looked at the direction she was flying in. She was very puzzled. It seems that even with Juxia's intelligence, she still couldn't understand Xiaohua's poor sense of direction. "You tell me the direction. I'll lead the way." Xiaohua said somewhat unconvinced. "Naturally, it's in front." Juxia chuckled as she looked at Xiaohua and pointed. That's right." Xiaohua slapped his forehead. Facing Juxia, he seemed to have really become an idiot. Immediately after, Xiaohua flew forward. However, because Juxia was behind him, Xiaohua was afraid that he would fly in the wrong direction. After flying for a while, he peeked at the sun and then flew again. However, not long after flying, Juxia flew up with a smile like a flower and said, "Don't fly. You've already flown in the wrong direction. How is that possible?" Xiaohua looked at the sun in the sky in disbelief. The position didn't change at all. Although Juxia had a smile on her face, she didn't have any intention of ridicule. She pointed at the sun in the sky and explained, "You're using the sun as the indicator, so naturally it's not wrong. However, the sun of the Sword Domain is different from the sun of the Cultivation 3 nations. Don't look at how it's always hanging there motionlessly. In fact, it has long changed its position. It's just that the sky is really big, so you didn't notice it." "This sun is also changing its position?" Xiaohua was instantly exposed by Juxia, but he didn't find it strange. He asked curiously, "The Hua nation isn't that far from the Cultivation 3 nations. Why is there such a big difference in the astronomical phenomena? As the secular people say, people in the same village have different sounds. Isn't that the case? Juxia said very patiently, don't look at how the sword domain is close to the Shi nation and the Huan nation. The sword domain is a long and narrow territory like a curved canyon. It's also located in the extreme north. That's sun. Oh, there's no need to say more. Isn't the alternation of the sun and moon greatly different from the Shi nation? This is true. Xiao Hua nodded helplessly. This kind of phenomenon is common in the Dawn Rain continent. Perhaps you'll naturally know in the future. Juxia didn't seem to like to explain, but she really needed Xiao Hua's help, so she patiently explained. However, she didn't want to say more, so she changed the topic. Besides, just now, didn't you feel that you were flying straight? Although you occasionally looked at the sun, the direction didn't change? How did you know I was going to say it? Xiao Hua was astonished. These words were exactly what he wanted to refute Juxia, but after hearing Juxia's explanation, he felt a little guilty and didn't dare to say anything. Don't tell me you know everything? This is also my guess. Juxia seemed to like to show off her cleverness, and she was happy to explain this kind of extremely accurate guess. Actually, everyone's feeling is based on the things around them as a reference. Just now, you felt that you were flying straight, but in fact, you've been using the sun as a reference. The real you has already deviated from the real direction. Of course, even if there's no reference, when people are flying, 99% of them will deviate from their own direction. Believing in feelings is actually not reliable. It's just that there are some places to refer to, so you can correct your direction. Isn't that so? Xiaohua thought for a bit. Not to mention that Juxia's words were quite profound. Even if it was based on his normal experience of finding his destination, Juxia's words were extremely accurate. But, you came here to find me. Isn't it just a feeling? Xiao Hua said rather unconvinced. My feeling is different from others. Juxia said with a smile. I'm the one who's outside of the 99%. Juxia was so happy, and in these few days, Xiao Hua's vigilance had been greatly reduced, almost treating her as the little sister next door. What else can you guess? Xiao Hua also tilted his head and asked. I can guess. Next, you'll let me lead the way. Juxia covered her mouth with her hand and laughed. Yeah, this seems like I can guess it myself. Xiao Hua was speechless. Let's go. Juxia waved her hand and flew to the front. Only then was Xiao Hua truly convinced and obediently flew behind Juxia. However, looking at Juxia happily jumping and flying in front of him, and then looking at her graceful waist and smooth lines, cough cough, it seems like it's not bad. Another 2 days passed, and a perfectly straight mountain peak appeared in front of him. It was like a treasured sword piercing into the sky from the ground. Xiao Hua understood that this should be the Sword Edge Peak. The miraculous creation of heaven and earth is nothing more than this. The 3 peaks of Taiching Sect, Tianju Peak of Lian Country, and the Sword Edge Peak of Huan Country are all similar. They are all so majestic. When Xiao Hua saw the Sword Edge Peak, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion as he recalled his encounter at Tianju Peak. Legend has it that the Sword Edge Peak of the Sword Domain was left behind by a sword god. At that time, a devil god from the upper realm escaped to the Sword Domain for some unknown reason. He ate swordsmen alive and wanted to turn the Sword Domain into a devil world. This sword god fought with the demonic god of the lower realm for dozens of days before finally defeating and killing the demonic god. However, the sword god himself died from heavy injuries. This Sword Edge Peak is formed from the divine sword in his hand. Juxia explained with a smile as he flew ahead without turning his head. -11. Chapter 2791. I don't care who created this sword peak. I just want to know where I can. Xiao Hua had already released his divine sense, but he could not find any trace of Fairy Hong Xia and the others. Just as he was talking to Ju Xia with a smile, he suddenly stopped. The smile froze on his face and disappeared in an instant. A layer of frost hung on his face. There are 6 third-grade illusory swordsmen over there. I can't guarantee that I can kill all of them at the same time. If you help me, I will definitely help you. Hee hee. I told you that you would definitely agree to help me. Zhu Xiao laughed. But then she said, however, this is not my help. You don't have to promise me now. This kind of bullying, even if it was me, I would still take action. So, I won't take this opportunity to blackmail you. Up to you. Xiao Hua's tone had already turned cold. The brilliance around his body flickered. Rumble. Thunder rumbled from under his feet. His entire figure streaked across the sky and flew towards a certain direction at lightning speed. Oh? Zhu Xia's small mouth opened slightly. She looked at Xiao Hua's imperial thunder transformation with some surprise. Then, a burst of splendor appeared in her eyes. There was even a thoughtful look on her face. Sure enough, my calculation was right. This Xiao Hua is indeed the person who can solve this predicament. But how can he solve this huge predicament? This really makes me puzzled. Zhu Xiao whispered and flew away. Although she could not catch up with Xiao Hua, she was not much slower. Senior brother. On the flowing cloud airship, Li Zongbao spat out a mouthful of blood. He could no longer support himself and collapsed on the flowing cloud airship. His face was pale gold, obviously the result of forcefully activating the immortal slaying whip. Fairy Hong Xia could not help but cry out, reaching out to support Li Zongbao. Unfortunately, Fairy Hong Xia herself was now an arrow at the end of its flight. Even moving her body was difficult. Although Xiao Mao could move at this time, he did not dare to slack off. He also used the dragon transformation art. The true core strength in his body poured into the flowing cloud airship like it was a spirit stone. He tried his best to activate the airship, trying to escape from the siege of the 6th, 3rd grade illusory swordsman. I'm fine. Li Zongbao slumped on the flying boat and struggled to pull out a jade bottle. Senior brother, I still have some pills here. It's from Xiao Longxin. Fairy Hong Xia clapped her hands hurriedly and took out a jade bottle from her storage bag and handed it to Li Zongbao. Li Zongbao coughed, and blood gushed out of his mouth as he took the spirit pill and said, Ahem, this guy. He actually forgot about his friends for the sake of his lover. It's been so long, yet he still hasn't given me a spirit pill. Seeing Li Zongbao's rare teasing, Fairy Hong Xia blushed slightly and whispered, he has always been a careless person. If senior brother wants it, you can ask. He is generous to his own family. I don't want it. I want to see when he'll remember it. Li Zongbao took the pill. His complexion improved a little as he spoke indifferently. Fairy Hong Xia's eyes flashed with a hint of confusion. If senior brother doesn't mention it, I'm afraid he'll never remember it for the rest of his life. Actually, there are times when this concubine is also puzzled. Darling Xiao is sometimes extremely stingy, but sometimes he is extremely generous. Sometimes he is extremely careless, but sometimes he is extremely meticulous. Sometimes his strength is frighteningly high, but sometimes his cultivation level is so low that it makes one laugh. Li Zongbao continued, sometimes he is as shrewd as a merchant, but sometimes he is as careless as a child. Xiao Mao could not help but chime in as well. It seemed like the three of them knew that they were in danger and would not be able to escape. Xiao Hua was thousands of miles away. Even if he wanted to rescue them, he would not be able to make it in time. Where did you tell Xiao Hua to meet up? Li Zongbao closed his eyes and asked softly. Drifting Cloud Lake. Fairy Hong Xia answered without hesitation. That is the entrance to Million Ming Mountains from Huan Country. It is also a slightly safer passage to Million Ming Mountains. What a pity. Li Zongbao sighed. Xiao Hua is the best at getting lost. If he could get lost from Drifting Cloud Lake to here, that would be great. He is a directionally challenged idiot. Fairy Hong Xia said with a smile, unable to hide her love for Xiao Hua. Li, senior brother Li. Xiao Mao could not help but stutter. Senior sister, you guys listen. Fairy Hong Xia and Li Zongbao were both injured. How could they be as strong as Xiao Mao? They glanced at each other in bewilderment. Thunder. Xiao Mao suddenly realized and shouted. This seems to be Big Brother's lightning escape technique. How? How is that possible? Li Zongbao and Fairy Hong Xia were both shocked. Drifting Cloud Lake was extremely far away. How could Xiao Hua fly here? Quick, fly towards the thunder. Li Zongbao ordered loudly. Perhaps Xiao Hua is being chased by the sword. Once they thought of Xiao Hua being chased by the sword, Li Zongbao and the rest were shocked. Xiao Hua had separated from them in order to avoid the transformation sword. However, after the three of them circled around outside, they ran into this place again and ran into the transformation sword again. Xiao Mao hesitated. Let's go. Now that things have come to this, to die together is also a blessing. Fairy Hong Xiao waved her hand and tried to open a small gap in the connate primordial water. Sure enough, in just a short moment, the sound of thunder resounded in the sky. Darling Xiao, Fairy Hong Xia could not help but murmur, her eyes slightly hot. Terrifying phoenix. If Xiao Mao could hear it, how could the 6th grade 3 illusory swordsman not hear it? Xiang Mufeng, who was about to go around the sword edge peak, stopped in midair. His eyes flashed with hesitation. The divine sword mystic technique was what he wanted. Moreover, he had flown in front of everyone. Xiao Hua was flying in front of him. If he could get the divine sword mystic technique before everyone else, he might be able to get some other benefits. After all, according to the news that came out from the 7 spiritual mountains, Xiao Hua was able to break the Brahma Pagoda array of the 7 spiritual mountains. Naturally, there would be a jade slip inside the array in his storage pouch. Although the Divine Sword Secret Codex had already been discussed and all 6 of them had a share, that storage pouch, there was no discussion. Whoever could get it would get it. Thinking of this, Xiang Mufeng's heart became hot. He urged the sword under his feet to fly towards the direction of the sound of thunder. However, after flying for 100 feet, Xiang Mufeng calmed down and hesitated. Nonsense. It was not like he did not know the expression of the terrifying phoenix when it killed the 4 grade 3 illusory swordsman. Didn't he team up with Wang Zhengqiang and the rest for this reason? How could he fly there alone? Wouldn't he be sending himself to death? Thinking of this, Xiang Mufeng hurriedly turned around and flew towards the direction of the flowing cloud flying ship. -11. Chapter 2792. However, what scared Xiang Mufeng the most was that his flying speed was far slower than the rumbling thunder behind him. When he used his divine will to scan the area behind him, he was scared out of his wits. Behind Xiang Mufeng, thunder rumbled in the sky, and dark clouds covered the sky. A tall and skinny cultivator was riding on the thunder. He could only see him through his divine will earlier, but now, he was already in Xiang Mufeng's field of vision. In fact, the moment Xiang Mufeng turned around, the cultivator with flashes of lightning around him had already caught up with him, as though he was the god of thunder himself. Save me! Xiang Mufeng was practically shouting for help in his heart. The lightning flashing around Xiao Hua's body was the anger in his heart. Although he didn't release his aura or divine sense, the boundless anger in his heart had already been displayed through the lightning. Xiang Mufeng had long sensed it in his heart. Xiang Mufeng did not dare to be careless anymore. He activated the sword origin around him with all his might. The sword light trembled rapidly, as if Xiang Mufeng was frightened. As the sword light was released, a sword in tint that resembled falling maple leaves flashed around him. Then, Xiang Mufeng's figure disappeared again, and a huge sword slowly appeared in midair. Of course, this huge sword flew extremely quickly. It left behind a yellow glow in midair, just like the traces of time. However, Xiang Mufeng's time was indeed too short. He had only flown a few hundred feet back, and before he could even get close to the flowing cloud-flying ship, he felt a violent aura and an indescribable sense of confinement descend from the sky. Although this restriction was not strong and was far from being able to restrict a 3rd grade illusory swordsman, once it got close to him, a sense of fear rose from the bottom of Xiang Mufeng's heart. It was as if he was born with it. Xiang Mufeng was a little puzzled. He didn't know what kind of mystical ability Xiao Hua used to confine him. However, just as he was puzzled, more than 10 bolts of heavenly lightning descended from the sky, answering his doubts. A bolt of lightning as thick as a thumb shot out from the dark clouds like a curved sword. It drew a beautiful arc in midair, and struck the huge sword that Xiang Mufeng had transformed into. Hiss! An indescribable pain appeared all over Xiang Mufeng's body. Even his heart felt as if it was being pierced by dozens of small swords. Buzz. Xiang Mufeng's sword flashed, and the sound of his sword echoed through the sky. Amidst the lightning, he actually turned his sword around and slashed at Xiao Hua. Humph! A cold snort came from the heavenly lightning. Even though the sound wasn't loud, the rolling heavenly lightning couldn't stop it. Xiao Hua looked at Xiang Mufeng, who was charging towards him with sword qi, but he didn't even look at him. With a cold snort, he grabbed with his hand again. Dozens of heavenly lightning once again poured down like a waterfall. Moreover, with a slap of his hand, the yin-yang sword gourd flew out of the space. 2 green and red spirit-slaying primary rays flew out from the gourd and followed the falling heavenly lightning towards the giant sword. On the other hand, Xiao Hua's figure did not stop in front of Xiang Mufeng's huge sword. Instead, he quickly flew towards the flowing cloud airship. This was because when Xiao Hua appeared, Wang Zhengqiang and the rest's expressions changed. The 5 of them transformed into swords and increased their flying speed, chasing after the flowing cloud airship. On the flowing cloud airship, the Xiantian primordial water that was originally protecting the airship was now gradually fading away. Fairy Hongxia had already held on for so long. When she saw Xiao Hua appear, she immediately relaxed. This relaxation was not a big deal. The Xiantian primordial water could no longer hold on, and it was all sucked back into the Ice Phoenix celestial body. As for Xiao Mao, his magic power had long been depleted. He was also desperately holding on by consuming pills to activate the dragon transformation art. Now, just like Fairy Hongxia, his magic power had also collapsed. He could no longer draw out any magic power from his body. Just like that, the flowing cloud airship stopped in midair. Under the 5-sword qi, the 3 of them were like toddlers. They no longer had any strength to resist. "How dare you?" Xiao Hua roared angrily. He waved his hands, and hundreds of lightning bolts rumbled and fell from midair. It was as if the heavenly river had burst open, carrying Xiao Hua's fury as it struck the 5-sword qi. However, Xiao Hua was still too far away. Although the lightning bolts fell, the 5 huge swords had already flown to about 100 feet away from the flowing cloud airship. Under the sword light, the 3 of them would be easily killed. The lightning bolts were a little too far away. "Go!" Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and the Dream Executioner and Mountain Splitter flew out at the same time. The 2 flying swords activated each other, and as fast as lightning, they slashed towards 2 of the swordsmen. Xiao Hua clapped his hands, and the Tangjiao shears, which he had not used for a long time, also appeared. Similarly, a yellow light flashed and struck towards one of the swordsmen. At this time, Xiao Hua ignored Xiang Mufeng. Under the bombardment of the lightning bolts, it was difficult for him to maintain his sword qi form. The moment he revealed himself, the spirit-punishing vital light had already flown close. Xiang Mufeng only had time to spit out his natal sword before the spirit-punishing vital light chopped off his head. "Quick!" Xiao Hua pointed his finger at the yin-yang sword gourd, and the spirit-punishing vital light flashed in midair again, chasing after the green and red sword light that was extremely close to it. As soon as Xiao Hua saw him, he used all of his methods, wanting to save the flowing cloud-flying ship in a short period of time. If it were any other time, Xiao Hua's methods could not be described as undeniably powerful, and they could not be described as unbelievably powerful. However, at this critical juncture, even with the Imperial Thunder transformation, Xiao Hua's speed was still a little slow. Especially when Wang Zhengqiang and the rest saw how easily Xiao Hua killed Xiang Mufeng, they had already hardened their hearts. They would rather die here than to kill Fairy Hongxia and the rest on the airship. However, compared to Xiao Hua's bloodshot eyes, Fairy Hongxia and the rest on the airship were abnormally calm. Especially Fairy Hongxia. Her eyes stared straight at Xiao Hua. She saw her lover covered in heavenly lightning, his feet stepping on lightning bolts. Her gaze saw her lover's might, and even more so, she saw her lover's true love. In an instant, all of her fear, and even the murderous sword light in front of her disappeared. She only wanted to look at her lover to her heart's content and imprint him deeply in her heart. When she had the chance in her next life, she would pick him out from the masses and be intimate with him for the rest of her life. Meng, how could Xiao Hua not see through Fairy Hongxia's gaze? His heart ached as he could not help but cry out. However, the strange thing was, this name was not Fairy Hongxia, but Meng. Aren't you tired? Why don't you stop and rest for a while? Let me tell you a story. Suddenly, a sweet voice rang out from behind Xiao Hua. A pretty girl appeared outside the flashing heavenly lightning, and at the place where the voice fell, the huge swords of the 5 sword cultivators stopped abruptly, as if they were restrained by some powerful force. In fact, the sword light slowly dissipated, and the figures of the 5 sword cultivators were revealed. However, their eyes were filled with joy, and they were all looking at Zhu Xia, who appeared behind Xiao Hua. They were like children who went to bed late, and when they heard their mother's call, they stopped playing and wanted to go into their mother's arms. Rumble, in that instant, dozens of bolts of lightning struck down from the sky, completely dispersing the sword light of the 5 people. At the same time, the joy in their eyes was also dispelled, and what replaced it was fear and confusion. However, their fear and confusion did not last long. The Dream Executor and Mountain Splitter came crashing down, piercing the foreheads of Left Jian of the Yin-Yang Sword Sect and Huang Ping of the Lunar Sun Sword Sect, respectively. The Spirit Executor Vital Ray came crashing down, decapitating Wang Zhengqiang of the Soaring Wind Sword Sect. The Soaring Dragon shears also flashed with a golden light, cutting Zhou Zhou of the Thousand Leaves Sword Sect in half. Pu Chengfeng of the Flat Mountain Sword Sect turned pale with fright. Just as he was about to flee, Xiao Hua chased after him for hundreds of meters and smashed his spiked club into a pulp. Looking at Pu Chengfeng's corpse falling from the sky, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh of relief. That heart-wrenching pain gradually relaxed. Turning his head, he saw Fairy Hongxia staring at him with infatuation. Xiao Hua's lips curled into a smile as he flew towards Fairy Hongxia. However, Xiao Hua was still bewildered. Dream. Who is this? Zhu Xia did not fly down, but remained in the air. He looked up at the gradually dissipating dark clouds and the hidden lightning. He then looked at the Yin-Yang sword gourd beside the flowing cloud airship and the Dream Executor and Mountain Splitter flying swords. Finally, his gaze fell on the soaring dragon shears, and a smile appeared on his face. My feelings. Can I be wrong? I'm not 99% of people. Zhu Xia's heart was filled with pride. Although I don't know how you can help me, but a cultivator with this kind of ability is actually an ordinary person. He will definitely be able to help me. Xiao Hua, you're finally here. Fairy Hongxia said happily when she saw Xiao Hua fly away. I've made you suffer. Xiao Hua landed on the airship. He originally wanted to hug Fairy Hongxia, but seeing Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao with their eyes closed, he could only reach out and hold Fairy Hongxia's soft hands. It's good that you're here. Fairy Hongxia's eyes were still fixed on Xiao Hua, unwilling to leave for a long time. These 6 people. I've already killed them. Xiao Hua said softly. You don't have to be afraid anymore. With you, I'm not afraid no matter where I am. Good, Xiao Hua let go. I'll go see Senior Li. Good, Fairy Hongxia pursed her lips and smiled. But when Xiao Hua turned around, he heard a dong sound. Fairy Hongxia fell on the airship and fainted. Hongxia. Xiao Hua was shocked. He understood that the so-called cultivators were all people who trained their minds, and their minds were all tough. Fairy Hongxia was already a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Her chi was restrained, and her mind was strong. Even if she was seriously injured, it would not be easy for her to faint. Her fainting was definitely not an ordinary injury. Xiao Hua turned around and helped Fairy Hongxia up. He hugged her weak body and placed 2 fingers of his right hand on her meridians very naturally. In just a moment, Xiao Hua frowned. Fairy Hongxia's chi and blood were both damaged, and her vitality was greatly damaged. -11. Chapter 27:93. Cough cough. Li Zongbao forced himself to open his eyes and whispered, Junior Sister Hongxia's Dharma body is injured. It was almost completely destroyed by the 6 swords. Xiao Hua immediately understood. A cultivator's Dharma body was formed from blood essence. Although it could increase one's magical power, if the Dharma body was injured, especially if it was destroyed, it was almost fatal. That was direct damage to one's blood essence. Even if he could save her and wake her up, she could cultivate in the future. Thinking about the elixirs he knew, none of them had such an effect. Even the Wuxian pill might not be effective. She's your beloved? Not bad, sister. A clear voice came from behind Xiaohua, and Juxia quietly appeared behind him again. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao looked over when they heard the voice, and they couldn't help but become extremely absent-minded. They only regained their senses after half a cup of tea's time, and their eyes were filled with fear. However, Juxia didn't care about the two of them. Instead, she looked at Fairy Hongxia meaningfully and said, "She has a Dharma body. It's the bloodline of a spiritual beast." Xiaohua was worried about Fairy Hongxia's injuries. He didn't care about Juxia's gaze and only answered indifferently. "If the Dharma body is injured or her vitality is damaged, I have a way." Juxia was still confident. "I have the confidence to heal her." "But, oh, you can really do it?" Xiaohua was overjoyed and said anxiously, "As long as you heal her injuries, I will definitely." "You don't have to promise anything." Juxia shook her head. "You still don't know what you need to help me with. It's too early to promise now. What if you can't help me in the future? Wouldn't it be a waste of words? Also, I have the confidence to heal her. Is her Dharma body. As for whether she can cultivate again, this injury will affect her future achievements. I don't know. Unless what?" Xiaohua said anxiously. "If you have any difficulties, just tell me." "I don't have any difficulties." Juxia smiled. "If you know how to refine pills, there won't be any difficulties." "Yes, I know how to refine pills," Xiaohua said without hesitation. Juxia's beautiful eyes looked up and down at Xiaohua and smiled. "What I'm talking about is not a simple refining technique. At the very least." Speaking up to here, Juxia seemed to be gathering his words. Xiaohua patted his storage bag and took out a medicinal pill, handing it to Juxia. "This was refined by this Xiao. Is it acceptable to you?" "Io." Juxia showed a rare look of astonishment, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. He took the pill and looked at it, then nodded and said, "If this pill was refined by you, of course it's fine." Furthermore, at this point, Juxia's eyes flickered as she smiled and said, "Moreover, I have a good idea. If you want this sister's cultivation to improve, then please wait a little longer. I will give you a pill formula that will satisfy you." "All right, I will listen to your orders." Although Xiaohua didn't know what Juxia was asking for, he knew that she had helped to save Fairy Hongxia and the other two. He already owed her enough. She shouldn't be coveting him and the others. Of course, if he could save Fairy Hongxia, Xiaohua would be more than happy to do so even if he had to put himself in danger. "Hehe, you can go now." Juxia stretched out her hand and said, "Give sister to me. I will check on her. You go and save those two stinky men." This man with a green face, his meridians are badly damaged. He used a magic treasure that exceeded his cultivation. And this man has also exhausted his vital essence. This is the result of using the flying boat. If we don't treat them quickly, it will affect their future cultivation. Hearing this, what else could Xiaohua say? He obediently handed Fairy Hongxia to Juxia and walked to Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao's side. He first looked at Xiao Mao, checked him, then patted his shoulder and said, "Xiao Mao, it's been hard on you." "It's nothing, big brother. You should take a look at Senior Li first." He waved the immortal slaying whip twice to block the illusory sword. "Otherwise, we would have been dead," Xiao Mao said hurriedly. His cultivation was the weakest among the three, and he suffered the least damage. I know." Xiaohua sighed and took out a pile of medicinal pills and placed them in front of Xiao Mao, allowing him to take them himself. He then walked to Li Zongbao. "Senior brother." At this time, Xiaohua no longer called Li Zongbao Senior Brother Li and said in a low voice, "Thank you, Senior Brother. No need to thank me. Even without you, I would still do it." Li Zongbao glanced at Xiaohua without hesitation and stopped him from thanking him. "Hehe, I know." Xiaohua nodded, "But no matter what, I still have to thank you." Give me your hand. Why? Li Zongbao was puzzled. Senior brother, don't worry about it. Xiao Hua did not explain. Cultivators had never been close to each other. Xiao Hua patted Xiao Mao's shoulder just now because he considered himself to be Xiao Mao's big brother. Letting Li Zongbao hand his wrist over to Xiao Hua like this was tantamount to handing his life over to Xiao Hua. However, Xiao Hua also believed that his friendship with Li Zongbao should have reached the point where he could entrust his life to him. Sure enough, although Li Zongbao was puzzled, he still took out his hand and let Xiao Hua place 2 fingers on his pulse. Juxia placed Fairy Hong Xia in a corner of the flying boat and also stretched out 2 fingers. However, her 2 fingers were placed between Fairy Hong Xia's eyebrows. As for herself, she looked at Xiao Hua's actions with interest. Xiao Hua felt Fairy Hong Xia's pulse for a moment, nodded slightly and said, Senior brother, you used the immortal slaying whip twice. That magic treasure is very demanding of true essence. Senior brother's magic power is insufficient, but you still forced yourself to use it. Not only are your meridians broken, even your dantian is damaged. Xiao Hua's words were very serious, but his tone was calm. However, Li Zongbao's reaction was even more unexpected. No need to say so much. You should look at Fairy Hongxia first. In the Battle of the Sword Tomb, her Dharma body was injured. Now that her Dharma body was defeated again, her injuries are several times worse than mine. I'm here. You don't have to worry about it, Zhu Xia said coldly, as if disdaining Li Zongbao's distrust. This is Zhu Xia. Only now did Xiao Hua remember to Zhu Xia and said, Little brother got lost in Huan country. Thanks to her guidance, I came to Sword Peak. Otherwise, even if I didn't run to Flowing Cloud Lake, I definitely wouldn't be able to see you guys in a short period of time. You came to Sword Peak specially? Li Zongbao was shocked. Seeing Li Zongbao's shocked expression, Zhu Xia was very satisfied. She snorted coldly and no longer paid attention to Li Zongbao. Xiao Hua gave Li Zongbao a meaningful glance and said, Zhu Xia is an extremely smart woman. She seems to be a strange person. Little brother also met her by chance. As for the details, little brother will slowly tell you in the future. You may know a person for a long time without understanding their heart. Li Zongbao said earnestly. I only know that if you don't hurry and treat her, not to mention cultivation, even your life won't last long. Zhu Xia said with disdain, at this time, you still want to guard against others and yourself. Aren't you tired? Big brother, don't talk anymore. Xiao Hua clapped his hand and took out a spirit pill and said, This is the heaven-mending pill that little brother refined. There aren't many of them, and I didn't give it to big brother. Hongxia also doesn't have it. What's the use of this spirit pill? Boo. Heaven-mending pill? You actually know how to refine heaven-mending pill? Li Zongbao was stunned and had a feeling of disbelief. Big brother still doesn't know? Other than giving birth, little brother knows how to do everything. Without a reason, I wouldn't refine this heaven-mending pill. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Puchi, Zhu Xia in the distance laughed. This laughter was like a silver bell, and that smile was like the bright and beautiful spring. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao were both dumbfounded. Seeing the two of them in a daze, Zhu Xia was slightly proud. She rolled her eyes at the two of them and ignored them. Seeing Xiao Mao so absent-minded, Xiao Hua still had some understanding. However, Li Zongbao was also the same. Xiao Hua just didn't understand. It seemed that Zhu Xia had said before that if one already had a cultivation companion in one's heart, or if one's love was deep, then one wouldn't be absent-minded. Could it be that Li Zongbao didn't have Kai Zhuoxia in his heart? No, suddenly, a trace of understanding flashed through Xiao Hua's mind. It's not that senior brother Li's willpower is insufficient, and it's also not that my willpower is greater than senior brother Li's. This was done deliberately by Zhu Xia. She is really powerful. She might really want my help, so she deliberately didn't leave a bad impression in front of me. Even when she showed her magical power in front of me, she didn't overdo it. This way, not only did she not make a fool of me, but she also made me feel proud. Just now, she made the 5 illusory swordsmen stop with just one sentence. What kind of cultivation do I have? How can I not be affected by her? Moreover, she didn't ask me to help her with anything, but she has always been kind to me. When it's time to help, can I refuse? Besides, she saved Hongxia Fairy, Xiao Mao, and Senior Brother Li's lives. Can I not help her? To be enemies with such a smart woman, it's really too dangerous. Xiaohua rejoiced as he thought, however, fortunately, the situation seems to be very advantageous to this Xiao. This woman can casually kill the illusory swordsman. Although she strangely appeared in the Huan country, didn't we also go deep into the Huan country to train? Didn't she say before? She specially came to Huan country to look for someone. I'm afraid that only my Dao sect has such a miraculous divination technique. She didn't tell me her background, so she must be a proud disciple of some master in the Cultivation 3 countries. Looking at this situation, it's more likely that we'll be friends and not enemies in the future. Junior Brother Xiao, earlier, what kind of elixir did you give Xiao Mao? Li Zongbao regained his senses and saw that Xiao Hua was also somewhat absent-minded. He asked in a low voice, that elixir's healing effect is very good. If it wasn't for the fact that it can't be compared to the legendary Heaven-Mending Pill, I would almost think that it was the Heaven-Mending Pill. -11. Chapter 2794. Oh, Xiaohua also came back to his senses and said in surprise, I gave Xiao Mao a lot of medicinal pills. Which one is Senior Brother talking about? It's the kind that is ugly and doesn't have any fragrance. It's used to heal injuries. Xiao Mao said, in the Sword Tomb array, Senior Brother Li was injured, and many of the elders in the meeting hall were also exhausted. Senior Sister gave it to Senior Brother Li to take. In the end, Senior Brother Li took all the medicinal pills given by Big Brother and gave them to the Gold Core elders. With that, Xiao Mao hurriedly flipped through the medicinal pills that Xiao Hua just gave him. He took out a medicinal pill and handed it to Xiao Hua, saying, Here, Big Brother, this is it. Oh, this. Xiao Hua glanced at it and said disapprovingly, This is the Luo Su pill. I refined it when I was practicing that day. It's a medicinal pill that nourishes the meridians and promotes true essence. There is also the Dripping Rain pill that was refined together with this Blue Sea pill. These two pills are about the same. I gave Xiao Mao and Hong Xia these two pills. Senior Martial Brother is referring to one of these two pills. This is the Luo Su pill, and the Shilin pill? Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. He stretched out his hand and took the medicinal pill from Xiao Hua's hand. He looked at it carefully again. Sure enough, this was the medicinal pill that he took during the Sword Tomb battle. This thing was similar to the Heaven-Mending Pill in his hand, but after looking at it carefully, it was still different. Indeed. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. It's refined with common spiritual herbs like Siming fruit. Because those spiritual herbs are cheap and not worth many spirit stones, I used it to practice. Have you seen the real Luo Su pill and Shilin pill? Li Zongbao's mood was a little agitated, and he looked straight at Xiao Hua and asked. Xiao Hua knew what Li Zongbao was talking about. He shook his head and said, I don't have any spirit stones. Naturally, I won't spend a lot of money to buy those Luo Su pills and Shilin pills. However, I know that the ones refined by others are not the same as the ones refined by me. Of course, I don't know why they are different. If Senior Brother asks too many questions, Little Brother doesn't know how to answer. Xiao Hua immediately sealed Li Zongbao's mouth. Sigh. Li Zongbao threw the pill to Xiao Mao and sighed. Whether it is the Luo Su pill or the Shilin pill, I have seen them before and have consumed them. However, Junior Brother Zhao's void-slaying pill was truly different from theirs. That day, I thought it was some kind of miracle medicine, and even showed off in front of Master and the various core formation masters. But I didn't expect that it was actually such an ordinary medicinal pill. Hearing this, Xiao Hua's heart tightened, and he raised his head to look at Xiao Mao. Xiao Mao was also stunned for a moment before coming to his senses. He slightly shrugged his shoulders, put the medicinal pill into his mouth, and closed his eyes to cultivate. Xiao Hua, you don't blame me. The situation on that day was that when the nest was overturned, no egg would remain intact. If even the core formation masters fall, then the foundation establishment and aura-refining disciples will definitely not be able to survive. As soon as he saw Xiao Hua raise his eyebrows, Li Zongbao understood Xiao Hua's vigilance and immediately explained via voice transmission. Actually, junior brother, with your cultivation and battle achievements, you are the #1 person in the Sword Dao Great War. Even if you have some difficulties in the entire Dawn Rain continent, who dares to touch you? Not to mention that I and the others won't agree. Even your Thunder Control sect? Can all the sects that are participating in the Sword Dao Great War agree? You also don't have to hide anything. Xiao Hua knew that this was Li Zongbao's good intentions, but he understood in his heart that how could he know about his own secrets and his enemies? Therefore, he also transmitted his voice. These are all my secrets. I know what I'm doing. But Li Zongbao shook his head again. There is no such thing as an airtight wall in this world. The current you can't hide anymore. I don't dare to say that there are people who know about it now, but I dare to say that in less than 5 years after the Dao Sword Great War, your actions, your heroic deeds, your fame will definitely spread throughout the entire Dawn Rain continent. Xiao Hua sighed. It was indeed so. Although he disguised himself as nameless and temporarily hid from the Dao sect and the sword cultivators, this trip to Huan country had already completely exposed his strength. Even if he didn't follow Fairy Hong Xia to Huan country, from Xue Mingcha's tone, there were already people among the sword cultivators who knew that he was nameless. One must know that nameless reputation was now 100 times more resounding than the terrifying phoenix. If the name of the terrifying phoenix was known, then so be it. But if the identity of John Doe was known, his strength was comparable to that of a Yuanying realm cultivator. He already had a certain status on the Dawn Rain continent. How could the powerful person who sealed her not have heard of her name? Furthermore, he didn't even know that it was the 3 nascent soul cultivators from Xuanyan School and Qiqiao sect who killed Shang Huaming. How could they not know? Which one of these cultivators hadn't lived for thousands of years? Which one of them was scheming and astute? How could they not investigate his background and origin? When that time came, how could he still hide? Not to mention taking revenge for Xiao Yuehong and Gong Mingwei, even he would find it difficult to protect himself. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have participated in that Sword Dao Great War. Xiao Hua was somewhat regretful, but then he smiled bitterly. If he hadn't participated in the Sword Dao Great War, the cultivators of the Dao sect, would the number of people who died be limited to the current number? Not to mention the others, Cui Hongshin and the others would have died long ago. Junior brother, if you still have any hesitation, you might as well. Li Zongbao pondered for a moment, and still transmitted his voice. I have the special pardon order of the sect leader of the Utopia sect. I can plead with Reverend He Ping of the Utopia sect for you. Haha, thank you, senior brother. Xiao Hua patted his chest and said, don't I also have the special pardon order of the Imperial Thunder sect? If you need anything, I can ask the sect leader of the Imperial Thunder sect for help. All right, Li Zongbao knew that Xiao Hua wasn't willing to explain clearly to him, and he couldn't force him. He nodded slightly, looked up at the millions of Ming mountains, and said in a low voice, actually, sometimes, I still miss the past. Unfortunately, this expression only stayed on his face for a moment, and then slowly disappeared. You'd better take the heavenly pill quickly, Zhu Xia said coldly from afar. If you delay any longer, you'll miss the past even more in the future. Li Zongbao glanced at Zhu Xia indifferently, sat down cross-legged, looked at the heavenly pill, opened it, and swallowed it, and began to regulate his breathing. Xiao Hua, come here for a moment, Zhu Xia said. All right, Xiao Hua agreed, and released his divine sense. He looked around, and then walked towards Zhu Xia. However, when he passed by Xiao Mao, he didn't forget to say, Xiao Mao, when you're done regulating your breathing, put away the 6 illusory swords just now. Then, without waiting for Xiao Mao's agreement, he walked quickly to Zhu Xia's side, squatted down, looked at Hongxia Fairy, and asked in a low voice, what plan do you have? Well, I've roughly looked at it, and I've also made some calculations, Zhu Xia said bluntly, as if she was an old acquaintance of Xiao Hua. Sister's primordial qi has been greatly damaged. and her bloodline has been destroyed, which is indeed very serious. Originally, I thought that if I could repair her bloodline, her primordial chi would be slowly nourished, and her dharma body would also be able to recover. However, this method should be inferior, and it's not good for her Tao foundation, and it would be difficult for her dharma body to achieve great success in the future. Xiao Hua knew that Juxia's thoughts were meticulous, and this was just a prelude, so he didn't reply, and quietly listened to her explanation. Compared to this inferior method, I have two other plans, the middle plan and the superior plan. Juxia said again. However, this all depends on your alchemy skills. Let's see what kind of pills you can refine. Oh? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, what do you mean? To tell you the truth, I have a pill formula and a secret technique here. This secret technique is used in conjunction with the pill. This pill is extremely difficult to refine, and it's already not bad for an ordinary alchemist to refine a first-grade pill. Of course, the spiritual herbs and other things in this pill formula can also be reduced, and the pill after the reduction is easy to refine. However, the difference in their effects was like heaven and earth. Moreover, it can't be used in conjunction with the secret technique. Previously, I thought that if you can refine the pill after the reduction, it can be regarded as a middle plan. It should be more beneficial for Sister's cultivation. However, looking at the appearance of your fellow apprentices, the pills you refine are actually not bad. So Sister has another superior plan. Juxia said with a smile, if you can refine a first-grade pill, Sister's dharma body will be able to be reconstructed, and it will be able to achieve great success in the future. After Juxia finished speaking, Xiao Hua frowned and asked, how many grades of pills are there? Pills are divided into 9 grades, and each grade has different effects. Then, do you have the spiritual herbs and other things to refine the pill? This pill, to be honest, I have always wanted to refine it. Juxia didn't hide it from Xiao Hua and said, I have collected these spiritual herbs for many years, and most of them are complete, but a small part has never been found. Hearing this, Xiao Hua's heart turned cold, and he said with a bitter smile, you don't even have the spiritual herbs, how can I refine a first-grade pill? You fool. Juxia said with a smile, I am talking about the spiritual herbs to refine a 9th-grade pill. How can that be refined by you? You only need to refine a first-grade pill, and Sister will be saved. Xiao Hua's heart shook, and he hurriedly lowered his head, not daring to look at Juxia's smiling face. Although this girl only has a budding face, under her smiling face, there is a hidden beauty hidden in her eyes, and even a little bit of it is unbearable for ordinary people. Juxia looked at Xiao Hua's embarrassed state, and then looked at Fairy Hongxia who was lying in her arms, and said with a smile, unfortunately, the situation is urgent, and I don't have any spiritual pills on me, so I can only make this plan in a hurry. Otherwise, based on Sister's ability to control the innate primordial water, I can find a better secret technique. Spiritual pills to cultivate the innate primordial water? Xiao Hua asked curiously what I am going to refine. Isn't this the spiritual pill? -11. Chapter 2795. Haha, more or less. Juxia was very patient with Xiao Hua. However, that spirit pill is a bit overbearing. It would be better if you could use a milder pill to nourish your body and replenish your blood and qi. Replenish your blood and qi? Xiao Hua's eyes turned slightly as he probed. Then is the parasol pill completed? Parasol pill? What kind of spirit pill is that? Juxia was stunned. Xiao Hua blinked and smiled. It's the blood and qi replenishing medicine commonly used by the Taoist sect. Oh, Juxia nodded. That kind of low-level spirit pill naturally won't work. All right, Xiao Hua nodded. If Juxia wasn't beside him, he would definitely take out the parasol pill for Fairy Hongxia to consume. However, since he didn't know how to repair his dharma body and Juxia knew, he naturally couldn't blindly command her. Did you also refine it? At this moment, Juxia smiled and said, take it out and let me see. It's also good to know your alchemy skills. Yes. Xiao Hua touched his hand and took out the earliest parasol pill he refined. This pill was refined under Xiao Hongyue's supervision. If it wasn't a critical moment, he definitely wouldn't be willing to take it out. Huh? Looking at the parasol pill in Xiaohua's hand, shock appeared on Juxia's face. She whispered, "The medicinal fragrance is restrained, and the pill veins are faintly discernible. You can actually refine a first-grade spirit pill? Is this a first-grade spirit pill?" Xiaohua was a little puzzled. He had never heard of a ninth-grade spirit pill before. Juxia obviously didn't pay attention to the conversation between Xiaohua and Li Zongbao, so she naturally didn't look at the sky-mending pill in Li Zongbao's hand. At this moment, she stretched out her hand and said, "Let me see this parasol pill." Xiaohua handed the parasol pill to Juxia. She held it in her hand and looked at it over and over again. Then, a five-colored light flashed in her eyes. This light disappeared in a flash, and then Juxia's face was really filled with shock. "Let me see the spirit pill you gave your senior brother just now." Juxia stretched out her hand and said again, "Oh, what's wrong?" Xiaohua didn't understand, but he still took out a spirit pill. Similarly, Juxia's eyes shone with an illusory light. However, after that, Juxia's face was filled with confusion. That small face frowned slightly, causing Xiaohua's heart to ache slightly. Only after a long time did Juxia ask again, "Do you still have this parasol pill? Can you give me one?" "Yes." Xiaohua took one without hesitation. What a joke. Not to mention one, even if it was 10, Xiaohua would still give it to him. "Many thanks." Juxia looked at the parasol spring pill. It was exactly the same as the previous one. She then carefully kept it in her bosom and sent the parasol spring pill into Fairy Hong Xia's mouth. She smiled and said, "Your parasol spring pill is even better than I expected. With this pill, things will be much easier in the future. Let sister rest for a few more days and let me think about it." "All right." Xiaohua nodded, his heart at ease. He then looked at the other medicinal pill in Juxia's hand and asked curiously, "Just now, did you see anything different about this medicinal pill? Don't you know the medicinal pills that you refined yourself?" Juxia said with a chuckle, "Indeed, I don't know. Please explain." Xiaohua answered honestly, "This medicinal pill is a top-notch item." Juxia held the medicinal pill in her hand and said with a smile, "Treat it as a first-grade spirit pill. It perfectly combines the spirit herbs and other ingredients used to refine spirit pills. Its effect is 30% greater than that of ordinary medicinal pills. Perhaps yours is even more. However, the parasol spring pill that I gave sister just now, although it was also a first-grade spirit pill, there was actually a strand of star power condensed inside for some reason. This star power is an extraterrestrial object, different from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in Xiaoyu continent. This star power can not only increase the medicinal effect of spirit pills, it can also cause them to mutate." Mutate? Xiaohua suddenly realized. He immediately thought of the parasol spring pill that the Zhu mother and daughter had taken in Jinghua City. It can break the cursed talisman? Kill the taboo? That's the general idea. Juxia's eyes glowed with a strange light. However, there are really too many mutations. I only know a little. But Xiaohua was puzzled again. These two types of medicinal pills were refined by me personally. It seems that there isn't any special difference. Gugu, Juxia covered her mouth and laughed. "I didn't ask you what the difference was when you refined them. I really don't know. Even if you asked me, I wouldn't be able to answer." Xiaohua scratched his head. "Then you'd better think carefully." Juxia said, "If you can refine another spirit pill that is similar to the parasol spring pill, the benefits to sister. I won't say more. You know it clearly in your heart." I know." Xiaohua nodded. This matter involved Fairy Hong Xia, so he naturally had to think carefully. In the following days, they spent their time on the airship, unable to find a suitable place to stay. Fortunately, there were no swordsmen here, nor were there any battles between soul cultivators and swordsmen. Xiao Mao's injuries were the lightest, and he would be able to move freely after 3 days. He collected the storage pouches of the 6 swordsmen and dealt with the corpses as usual. Then, he found a suitable place 100 miles away. After another 3 days, Li Zongbao was finally able to move. Only then did he activate the flowing cloud-flying ship and fly to this place. As for Fairy Hong Xia, who was the most seriously injured, she still hadn't woken up. However, Xiaohua believed in his parasol spring pill. Moreover, through taking her pulse, he knew that Fairy Hongxia was steadily recovering. Xiao Mao was looking for a valley at the bottom of two mountains. This was rarely seen in Huan country. Xiaohua and Xiao Mao steered the flying boat to land at the foot of the mountain. Xiaohua very naturally clapped his hands and took out the capital star array spirit talisman again. Juxia was dumbfounded when he saw Xiaohua casting out the talismans with great familiarity and the capital star formation slowly taking shape. He exclaimed in disbelief, "Xiaohua, this is the capital star formation? Oh, you really know everything." Xiaohua was a little embarrassed. It was as if everything was no longer a secret in Juxia's eyes. He had used talismans countless times to arrange them, but no one had ever discovered them. Before this star array was even arranged, it was seen through by Juxia. "It's the capital star array," Xiaohua replied. "You really have a lot of knowledge. You even know this array. Where did you get it?" Juxia asked anxiously. "I made it myself." Xiaohua also planned to keep it a secret from Juxia, so he blinked. You also know how to make talismans and array talismans?" Juxia was stunned. This answer was clearly out of her expectations. Yes, except for giving birth. After Xiaohua said it, he felt that it was inappropriate. He lowered his voice and said, "I know everything else." Juxia didn't care at all. She said anxiously, "Then, can you help me make a set?" After saying that, Juxia was a little regretful. She said anxiously, "Forget it. Pretend I didn't say anything. This item is so precious." "Oh, you want to ask me for help?" Xiaohua asked. "Alas, I don't even know what I want to ask you for help." Juxia sighed. "From this, maybe it's this array? Or maybe it's not. It's okay, this array is yours." Xiaohua waved his hand. "You saved Hongxia. This is my thanks." Xiaohua, you are so nice." Juxia happily jumped on the foothill. Her braids swayed behind her head, looking very cute. This moment of happiness really came from the bottom of her heart. It seemed that she hadn't felt like this for a long time. Her smile was as brilliant as a mountain flower and as graceful as the bright moonlight. The slyness and intelligence on her face had long been covered by this joy. This is how a little sister should be." Xiaohua was also happy to see this. Xiao Mao was unhappy. He twisted his fingers and said, "Big brother, you don't have to be so obvious. You have so many good things. Why didn't you take them out earlier?" Why didn't I take them out earlier?" Xiaohua rolled his eyes at him and said, "You have eyes but can't see." "Fine, I won't argue with you." Xiao Mao said with a smile, "You gave them to this one. You might as well give one to me." Cough cough. Li Zongbao, who was originally cultivating with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. Although he was only coughing, his eyes were very obvious. From the looks of it, Li Zongbao had already learned a lesson from his experience with medicinal pills. As long as there was something good, then, it was better to open his mouth first. "This is a spiritual talisman," Xiaohua said with a little exasperation. "Without spiritual beast fur and blood, where do you want me to refine it for you?" "Spiritual talisman," Xiao Mao said with surprise. "So Big Brother also knows how to refine spiritual talismans. This is the first time I've heard of it." And not bad. Li Zongbao's meridians were damaged, and his mental cultivation method seemed to have some flaws. Seeing that the two of them were only praising him and not refining the materials, Xiaohua could only bitterly smile. "I have some spiritual beast fur here. I don't know what you need." Juxia was very obedient. She stretched out her hand and took out a storage bag. "You don't need it," Xiaohua said with a smile. "You should quickly take a look at what Hongxia needs." I have already prepared this." Juxia was not polite. She took out a jade slip and handed it to Xiaohua, saying, "According to what I discussed with you before, this is the pill formula of the flying shadow pill. Moreover, I also listed the spiritual herbs, spiritual blood, and other things needed to refine the flying shadow pill from the 1st grade to the 6th grade. As long as I have it, I will mark it. You do as you see fit." Presumably, you are an alchemist, so you should have some things in your storage bag. Hearing this, Xiaohua was overjoyed. He didn't expect Zhu Xia to be so well prepared and so considerate. She was really meticulous. After taking the jade slip and probing it with his divine sense, Xiaohua was even more surprised. Inside was the pill formula of the flying shadow pill, but Xiaohua had never seen such a detailed pill formula in his life. -11. Chapter 2796. This pill formula was divided into 6 grades. The main ingredients of each grade were similar, but the age of the main ingredients and the amount of each main ingredient were different. However, when it came to the supplementary ingredients, the differences were huge. The most important thing was that Zhu Xia had written down the reasons for these differences very clearly. Rather than saying that this was a flying shadow pill formula, it was better to say that this was a simple pill formula analysis technique. Many thanks, Xiaohua raised his head and said in a low voice. Hee. Zhu Xia pursed her lips and said, "Don't thank me. This is all ready-made. I just showed it to you. Moreover, this pill formula doesn't have a refining method, so it's useless for others to have it. Of course, you can use this pill formula, but you can't leak it out. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." I know what I'm doing. Xiaohua naturally knew the importance of this pill formula. It was probably a secret technique of Zhu Xia's sect. It was already good that he could refine this flying shadow pill, so how could he dare to leak it out? "I believe you." Zhu Xia nodded and took out a storage bag. "This is the material I collected in my early years. Take it." "Don't." Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said, "I'd better take a look first. There are many things in this pill formula that I've never seen before. I still need to ask you for advice." "All right." Zhu Xia tilted her head and thought for a moment, then said, "What you know is what you know. What you don't know is what you don't know. Xiaohua, with your cultivation method, you'll definitely go very far." After that, Xiaohua activated the capital star array and casually wrote down the method of setting up the capital star array on 3 jade slips. He threw 2 of them to Li Zongbao and Xiaomao to shut their mouths, and handed the last one to Zhu Xia. Thus, the 4 of them each stayed in one place and started to comprehend the jade slips. The flying shadow pill's pill formula was extremely detailed, but it was also strange because there was spirit blood inside the pill formula. Zhu Xia had already said that it contained spiritual blood before he got the pill formula. However, Xiaohua didn't care. He even thought that he had misheard. When he had first obtained the jade slip, he had used his divine will to look at the spirit plants, as well as their names and shapes. Some of the spirit plants had different names, but based on their shapes, he could tell that they existed in the space. As for the spirit blood, he had ignored it. When he started looking at the first grade flying shadow pill, he realized that there was a type of spirit blood in each grade after the main ingredient, and each spirit blood had a different name. Damn it, Xiaohua suddenly realized something. This flying shadow pill, I'm afraid it uses spiritual blood as a catalyst to stimulate the cultivator's bloodline and create a dharma body. This is the secret technique that the cultivation aristocratic families really want. Zhu Xia, Xiaohua opened his eyes and asked in a low voice, "The spirit blood inside this flying shadow pill can only be used after it has been refined?" "Of course." Zhu Xia nodded matter-of-factly. "How can spirit blood be used if it isn't refined? You're an alchemist yourself. There's no reason you don't know, right?" But then, Zhu Xia suddenly froze and said with some realization, "Could it be, you don't know how to refine spirit blood?" Xiaohua bitterly smiled. He knew how to refine spirit blood, but he didn't know that there was also refining spirit blood in alchemy. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua said, "I know how to refine spirit blood, but I don't know if it's the same as what you're talking about." Zhu Xia shook his head. "I only know how to refine spirit blood. I don't know the specifics." "All right." Xiaohua was helpless and could only try his best. Since it was refining spirit blood, the demon realm's blood refining technique should be useful. Half a day later, Xiaohua and Zhu Xia didn't stay idle and finally thoroughly understood the flying shadow pill's pill formula. Normally, Xiaohua's alchemy skills were already very good, and he knew all the spirit plants like the back of his hand. However, the spirit plants in this pill formula were different from the ones he knew. so he had to ask them one by one. There were even some spirit plants that Xiaohua didn't have and Juxia didn't collect. According to the pill formula, Xiaohua found similar spirit plants in his space and discussed the effects of these spirit plants with Juxia. Juxia didn't know much about spirit blood, but he had some knowledge about spirit plants. After discussing with Xiaohua, they complemented each other. After half a day, not only did Xiaohua have a thorough understanding of the pill formula, he also had a new understanding of the planting and refining of some spirit plants. You're really old and learn. Xiaohua sighed, as if Juxia's words had opened a new door to alchemy for him. The cultivation foundation of this dawn-rain continent is really unfathomable. Another half a day later, Xiaohua brought back the spirit herbs and spirit blood that Juxia had collected. He compared them with the pill recipe and the spirit herbs in his space. He sorted out the materials needed to refine the flying shadow pill and returned the bag of holding to Juxia. Juxia looked at the spiritual herbs that had barely been touched and the spiritual blood that had been taken away. Her heart was filled with astonishment. However, her face remained calm and she did not say anything. It was as if everything was within her calculations. After putting away the storage pouch, Juxia asked, "Are you ready? Are you going to refine pills on the flying boat? Have you found the reason for the difference in the pills?" Xiaohua smiled bitterly. In these past few days, when he was looking at the pill formula, he was also thinking about the difference between the earliest parasol pill and the later pills. He was even thinking about the difference between the rejuvenation pill and the ageless pill. The rejuvenation pill and the ageless pill could be understood. After all, one was refined with the power of heavenly thunder, and the other was refined with ordinary methods. The power of heavenly thunder was the reason why the rejuvenation pill could bring back the spring. However, Xiaohua couldn't understand the reason why the parasol pill was unique. It seemed there wasn't any difference. It wasn't until the end that Xiaohua recalled the details of his alchemy that he finally had an idea. When he was refining the parasol pill, he was guarding the side of the pill furnace. But when he was refining other pills, he wasn't completely guarding the side of the pill furnace. He even left the cave to go to other places. Maybe it's because my character is good and I can refine pills by guarding beside the pill furnace? Xiaohua could only wipe his face like this. Now that Juxia asked, he naturally couldn't say the reason. He only looked around and said, "Naturally, I can't refine pills on the flying boat. It's too noisy and will delay your cultivation. I'd better find a cave. As for the difference, I have some ideas. I can only give it a try. You take a drop of spirit blood for every pill. Are you planning to refine one pill for every pill?" Juxia asked tentatively. "Can you only refine one pill at a time?" Xiaohua asked back. "Oh, you can refine 2 pills?" Juxia was slightly puzzled. "Oh, I understand. Your pill formula has the weight of 1 flying shadow pill." Xiaohua suddenly understood. "That's right." Juxia nodded. "If you can refine 2 flying shadow pills at a time, the sun will rise from the west. Ha ha ha. If you use 2 drops of spirit blood, you can naturally do it." Xiaohua laughed. "I can only use 1 drop of spirit blood." Juxia nodded seriously. "Can you refine 2 drops of spirit blood at a time?" This, Xiaohua was astonished. He had refined 9 drops of spirit blood at a time, but he didn't know if his refining method was the same as what Juxia said. "Try refining the first-grade flying shadow pill first." Juxia laughed. "If you fail, it doesn't matter. Sister can also use the ungraded flying shadow pill." Xiaohua knew that the ungraded flying shadow pill was a pill that didn't require spirit blood. It could only help Fairy Hongxia recover and repair her Dharma body. It couldn't achieve the effect of breaking and rebuilding. "For Hongxia, I will also refine the first-grade flying shadow pill." Xiaohua looked at the still unconscious Fairy Hongxia and said firmly. In fact, when Xiaohua took the Wuxin pill, he wanted to wake Fairy Hongxia up. However, Juxia insisted that he couldn't wake her up after using the pill. The longer she was unconscious, the better it was for the Dharma body's recovery. Xiaohua didn't quite understand the meaning of this, but he still listened to Juxia's arrangement. "I believe you." Juxia nodded with a smile, as if she had returned to being the girl who had everything under control. In the valley, there were still small caves. Xiaohua found one a little further away. When he entered, He clapped his hands and took out several puppets. Looking at the puppets gradually enlarging the cave, Xiaohua casually waved his hands and prepared to take out the three-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace. But at this moment, Xiaohua suddenly froze. Cold sweat seeped out of his back. He looked at the puppets in front of him and shuddered. What's wrong with me? Xiaohua couldn't help but ask himself, this Juxia, with such a remarkable ability and a mysterious origin, I should be extremely wary of her. We've only been friends for 10 days and I actually revealed so many of my secrets to her. Even eldest senior brother and master don't know these things. How can I trust her so much? How can I tell her everything I know without holding anything back? That's right, ever since he met Juxia, Xiaohua had been somewhat wary at the beginning. But gradually, this wariness disappeared. Not to mention Juxia's beauty, even Juxia's cuteness was deeply imprinted in Xiaohua's heart. He only treated Juxia as someone he trusted. Not to mention Xiaohua's lightning escape technique. Even dream execution, mountain splitting, spirit execution origin light, and soaring dragon scissors were all revealed to Juxia. There was also the art of alchemy, the art of talisman creation. Juxia saw through it all. Even the talisman of the heavenly star array. Xiaohua agreed without hesitation the moment Juxia asked for it. This was even more inconceivable for the stingy Xiaohua. Now, Xiaohua actually wanted to refine the flying shadow pill in front of Juxia and took out the puppets. Everything seemed to be out of Xiaohua's control, as if Juxia had unknowingly taken control of it. What if Juxia wanted to observe Xiaohua's alchemy later? Would Xiaohua agree or disagree? -11. Chapter 2797. What scared Xiaohua the most was that Juxia had let nature take its course. Everything was untraceable, and Xiaohua could not help but do it. It was true that Xiaohua had intended to reveal some of his cultivation, but he had never thought of revealing everything about himself. How could Xiaohua explain the several tens of thousands of years of medicinal age of the spiritual herbs used in alchemy? However, when Xiaohua left Juxia's side, he came to a realization. However, when Xiaohua thought about it, it seemed that everything did not allow him to have any doubts. When Xiaohua first met Juxia, Juxia only asked for his help. She did not mention any rewards or conditions. Then, Juxia said that he had to come to Sword Peak. Otherwise, Fairy Hongxia would lose her life. Although he was a little doubtful, he still came. When he met Fairy Hongxia and the rest in danger, although he did not show it, he already trusted Juxia in his heart. After that, Juxia's words saved Fairy Hongxia's life and death. However, Juxia didn't even say a word of thanks. He even told Xiaohua very clearly that this had nothing to do with asking for his help. This was truly a righteous man. It made Xiaohua trust Juxia again. After that, Juxia took out the flying shadow pill formula that she had collected and came up with the best, middle, and worst plans to save Fairy Hongxia. This made Xiaohua shed tears of gratitude, and he had already let his guard down. However, when he thought about it again, while saving Fairy Hongxia, Juxia was also making use of Xiaohua to refine pills? In this world, there has never been a lack of smart people. But to be so smart, to let someone be sold and help her count the spiritual stones, and even bargain for her. How many are there? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. This does not seem to be smart. If it is the power of charm or the art of seduction, that is the real deal. Thinking of this, Xiaohua secretly released his Buddhist awareness. Sure enough, Juxia sat beside Fairy Hongxia, guarding her. It was fine to say that she cared about Fairy Hongxia, or that she wanted to kidnap Fairy Hongxia, but she did not notice that Xiaohua was opening up a cave. She always did the most appropriate thing at the most appropriate time, and would not let others have too much suspicion. A cultivator who can kill 5 third-grade illusory sword cultivators with one sentence, actually called a late-stage foundation establishment female cultivator sister. Isn't this a bit too much? Xiaohua thought of how Juxia called Fairy Hongxia sister. Previously, it was extremely intimate, but now he felt that it was too strange. But I am just Xiaohua. Even if I am nameless, what is worthy of Juxia's desire? Xiaohua really couldn't figure it out. With some inexplicable apprehension and caution, Xiaohua activated the puppets a little more. Soon, he hastily opened up a cave. Taking advantage of the fact that Zhu Xia wasn't paying attention, he hurriedly put away the puppets. However, just as Xiaohua took out the pill furnace and was about to preheat it, Zhu Xia came. Xiaohua, can I see how you refine pills? Zhu Xia's smile was very beautiful, like a little sister talking to her brother calmly. This? Xiaohua hesitated, not daring to look at Zhu Xia's face. He lowered his head and said, this Xiao has already thought about it. One of the differences between refining pills is that when Xiao Mao first refined the parasol pill, this Xiao refined it alone, and there was no one watching. Oh? So that's the case, then I can only not watch. Zhu Xia did not have the slightest bit of awkwardness or displeasure. Her voice was still very pleasant to hear. I still want to see how this first-grade pill is refined. Hee, wait until this Xiao refines it, then you can see. Xiaohua said with a smile. Okay, you refine it yourself. Zhu Xia skipped out again. When she reached the entrance of the cave, she laughed and said, leave big sister to me. I will also tidy up that secret technique and give it to you in a while. That secret technique also targets 6th-grade pills, so it is a bit different. You and sister are the closest, so you have to help her. AI. This Zhu Xia. Should I trust her? Or should I not? Xiaohua only dared to raise his head at this time, looking at Zhu Xia's graceful back, and thought with some worry. At this time, although Xiaohua was a little confused and even worried about Fairy Hongxia, his alchemy skills had reached the point of perfection, so refining the flying shadow pill was not difficult at all. He threw in the spiritual herbs one by one, and when the spiritual herbs turned into juice in the furnace, he waved a spell to quench the impurities inside. As the green smoke was produced in the furnace, wisps of medicinal fragrance rushed to his face, and Xiaohua's heart gradually calmed down again. After all, Zhu Xia looked like a budding girl, but her magical powers were unfathomable. Xiaohua was definitely not her opponent. Why would someone like her, who could easily kill him, want to scheme against him? Instead of being on tenterhooks, it was better to face her calmly. Perhaps everything was just Xiaohua's own guess? Of course, even if she coveted the flying shadow pill, he would help her refine it and get the pill formula. Why not? In addition to being extra careful, Xiaohua was really at his wit's end. Spells were cast one after another, and the Samadhi True Fire was like a dragon surging outside the 3-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace. This kind of fire control method was simply beyond the reach of ordinary alchemists. Even seeing that the pill furnace was fine for the time being, Xiaohua even diverted a bit of attention to refine the jade talisman. In fact, as early as when Xiaohua was refining the fire talisman, he wanted to refine the talisman of the capital star array into a jade talisman. Unfortunately, this guy never had time to do what he wanted to do, so he had been delaying it. Until now, when refining the flying shadow pill, he had leisure. After all of the medicinal liquids had been refined, Xiaohua began to fuse the pills according to his previous understanding of the flying shadow pill's pill formula. Generally speaking, fusing pills was the key to refining pills. The amount, order, and timing of each medicinal liquid were all related to whether or not the pill could be formed. The true pill formula contained the essence of the pill refining method. Without these specific methods, the possibility of refining a pill was next to none. Fortunately, Xiaohua's alchemy skills had always been self-taught. After the spiritual herbs of the flying shadow pill were replaced by him, he was even more confident. After a few days, he managed to fuse dozens of medicinal liquids into a fist-sized pill liquid. At this time, Xiaohua understood that the part he was familiar with had been completed. The next step was to refine the spiritual blood. Xiaohua secretly released a strand of Buddhist consciousness and looked at Zhu Xia. Zhu Xia was still sitting next to Red Dawn Fairy, and there was no change. On the contrary, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao looked at the cave impatiently, as if they were worried about him not coming out. Especially Xiao Mao, who was sniffing from time to time, as if he was inhaling the medicinal fragrance. Red Dawn. Why hasn't she woken up yet? After so long, Xiaohua was puzzled again. Even if she was seriously injured, she should have woken up by now after taking the parasol pill. Could it be that this was done by Juxia? If I don't refine the flying shadow pill, Red Dawn won't be able to wake up? Withdrawing his Buddhist consciousness, Xiaohua helplessly released the spiritual fire to refine the drop of spiritual blood known as the Swift Sparrow. Xiaohua had already helped Li Zongbao refine his essence blood, so controlling the refining of this spiritual blood was not a difficult task. However, what shocked Xiaohua the most was that as the spirit fire tempered the spirit blood, a 3-foot-tall shadow gradually appeared within the rain-like spirit blood. The formation of this shadow was 10 times more difficult than the formation of the shadow within Li Zongbao's spirit blood. Xiaohua actually refined it for a total of 9 days, and after taking dozens of spiritual power replenishing pills, he finally refined the complete shadow. Lucky! Xiaohua secretly wiped away his cold sweat. Just the spiritual blood of a first-grade spirit pill is so difficult to refine. No wonder this flying shadow pill. Even Juxia couldn't refine it. Moreover, it's a good thing that I have already refined my essence blood. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have been able to complete it in 9 days. Furthermore, with my current pill refining skills, I can barely extend the time needed to refine the pill. I'm afraid that this pill will condense before I finish refining the spiritual blood, right? Go, Xiaohua urged the spiritual blood, and the shadow of the swift sparrow was about to enter the pill furnace. Quick, an indescribable cry came out from the shadow. The blood shadow of the swift sparrow that had been completely refined seemed to have gained some intelligence. It knew that the alchemy furnace was its only way out, so it started to struggle and wanted to escape from Xiaohua's control. The sound of the swift sparrow was extremely loud, and Juxia, Li Zongbao, and Xiaomao all heard it. Xiaomao couldn't help but rush to the entrance of the cave, as if he wanted to help. As for Juxia, he didn't even frown, and his body naturally didn't move. He only slightly opened his eyes, and then closed them again. Li Zongbao turned around, looked at Juxia and Fairy Hongxia, and walked over to Xiaomao's side and whispered to him. The two of them knew that Xiaohua was refining pills inside the cave. Although they were worried, they didn't rush in. Seeing that the blood shadow of the swift sparrow was so unruly, Xiaohua wasn't alarmed and was instead happy. This level of spiritual blood was the real spiritual blood. To deal with this kind of blood shadow, Xiaohua already had a method. Hundreds of soul strands were released from his law eyes and tightly bound the blood shadow. The swift sparrow's shadow struggled a few times, but how could it be a match for Xiaohua's soul strands? Go, Xiaohua sneered, and urged the soul strands to pull the 3 qi-long shadow and threw it into the pill furnace. Immediately after, several pill refining techniques were sent in, and a formless imprisonment was born from the pill furnace, enveloping the swift sparrow's blood shadow and forcefully dragging it into the pill liquid. Good, seeing that the pill refining techniques were also effective against the blood shadow, Xiaohua was overjoyed. Immediately after, he sent the pill refining techniques into the pill furnace, and the magic power formed ripples that converged into the pill liquid, firmly imprisoning the swift sparrow's blood shadow inside. -11. Chapter 2798. Not only that, the blood shadow of the swift sparrow struggled a few times in the pill elixir and gradually merged with the pill elixir. So that's how it is. Xiaohua's divine sense never left the pill furnace and even stayed near the pill elixir. He could clearly see that among the dozens of spirit herbs of the flying shadow pill, other than the sovereign, minister, and 5 elements, there was also the ability to melt and confine the spirit blood shadow. The different pill elixirs formed thin threads that tightly wrapped around the blood shadow and slowly seeped in. The art of alchemy is also limitless. Xiaohua sighed inwardly. Big brother. Xiaomao's voice came several times. No matter. Xiaohua finally had the time to say, I'm very normal here. In a few days, I'll be able to form the pill. Good. Xiaomao and the others heard and then nodded. On the contrary, Juxia's indifferent face revealed some astonishment. The fusion of the flying shadow pill didn't need to be said. Because of the addition of the spirit blood, the time needed was also extended. In the end, it took a total of 49 days for the pill to be formed. When Xiaohua finally sent the pill-forming technique into the phoenix-patterned 3-legged vermilion bird furnace, A clear sound rang out. The top of the phoenix pattern cauldron opened by itself. A fist-sized bird flew out of the cauldron and flew out of the cauldron. Good. As expected of the flying shadow pill, Xiao Hua's divine sense clearly saw that the swift sparrow was a shadow. A successful flying shadow pill could actually have a shadow. This was the first time Xiao Hua had seen it, so he definitely didn't expect it before. Xiao Hua waved his sleeve and covered it with the heaven and earth sleeve. Without any suspense, the swift sparrow fell into Xiao Hua's hand. A pill the size of a thumb was spinning in the air. This pill was different from the ones Xiao Hua had refined before. On the outside of the pill, there were fine pill veins that were faintly discernible. These pill veins formed the figure of a swift sparrow, as if it would fly out at any moment. The pill was blood red, and there was a faint layer of blood-red mist inside, protecting the pill. Even Xiao Hua's divine sense couldn't penetrate it. The pill image of this first-grade flying shadow pill was actually so beautiful, completely different from the ugly pill that Xiao Hua had refined earlier. Congratulations, Xiao Hua. Juxia stood at the entrance of the cave with a smile. He didn't step into the cave as he spoke loudly. Hee, I still have to thank fellow Taoist for the pill formula. Xiao Hua glanced at the pill furnace that was still surrounded by the true Samadhi fire and walked to the entrance of the cave. He placed the flying shadow pill in front of Juxia and said, I wonder if fellow Taoist is interested in this pill? Juxia did not stand on ceremony. He took the flying shadow pill and examined it. Then, he smiled and said, Your alchemy skills are indeed extraordinary. It far exceeds my expectations. This pill should be a first-grade high-grade pill. Then, 5 colors once again appeared in Juxia's eyes. After the brilliance passed, Juxia slightly frowned and said curiously, Xiao Hua, although this flying shadow pill is very high quality, but it conforms to the norm. It is far from the star energy in the Wu Tsang pill from before. Is that so? Xiao Hua stared blankly. He couldn't help but scratch his head as his brows wrinkled. Hee, this is already not bad. Juxia hurriedly smiled and said, This pill can already be consumed. Do you want to continue refining the second-grade flying shadow pill? Or do you want me to wake sister up and consume it? As expected, Xiao Hua thought to himself, Red Cloud's body, it was indeed Juxia's doing. But she just admitted it. This makes me unable to. Do you think it's better to wake her up now? Or wake her up later? Xiao Hua pushed the question to Juxia. Hee, naturally it's better to wake her up later. Juxia smiled and said, In this way, not only will sister have a better harvest, I will also be able to obtain a first-grade flying shadow pill. Is she really fine? Xiao Hua asked worriedly. Of course. Juxia nodded. Right now, sister is in hibernation. Although she is unconscious, her body is repairing itself. This kind of repair is far more effective than when a person is awake. Moreover, the effect on the body is far-reaching. Or rather, it is more in line with the heavenly Tao. That's right. Xiao Hua secretly nodded. This Juxia is right? Big brother, Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao spoke again after Juxia. It was very obvious that Juxia grasped the timing extremely well. When she should appear, she would definitely appear first. When she shouldn't appear, she would definitely not appear. It's fine. Little brother's spirit pill has already been formed. Xiao Hua looked at the two people's concern and said to Li Zongbao, Red Cloud's injury has the most basic guarantee. Little brother will discuss with Miss Juxia and see if we can take another step. Stop before going too far. Li Zongbao said indifferently and turned his head. After taking 2 steps, another indifferent sentence floated over. Going too far is as bad as not going far enough. If it was someone else, they would naturally think more and perhaps stop here. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua had always pursued perfection. That day when he was condensing his core in the sword tomb, facing the baptism of the 3 gold lightning tribulation, he did not hesitate to take out his primordial spirit that could benefit from the light. Whatever flying sword, whatever small dipper, he gave it all out. To put it bluntly, he was a person who wanted to take advantage of the netherworld even after death. How could he stop? After resting for half a day, Xiao Hua threw the second batch of spirit herbs into the three-legged vermilion bird phoenix pattern furnace one by one. This time, Juxia did not rush him at all. Even the first-grade flying shadow pill, Juxia only appreciated it for a moment before returning it to Xiao Hua. She clearly said that she would definitely not accept the flying shadow pill if she did not have any extra flying shadow pills. Seeing Juxia so upright, Xiao Hua almost doubted his own thoughts. Looking at the gradually forming liquid pill, Xiao Hua then took out some jade essence and was about to continue refining jade talismans. However, just as the jade essence melted into liquid, Xiao Hua suddenly froze. How could he know how to refine talismans when he was refining the Wucang pill? Other than guarding the pill furnace and meditating, there was nothing else he could do. Furthermore, he had even dozed off in the pill room of Yellow Flower Ridge. Could it be related to meditating? Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then stretched out his hand and put the liquid jade into his space. He looked around himself and really closed his eyes to meditate. Outside the cave, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao were comprehending the capital star array. Even Juxia wanted this array, so Li Zongbao and the others naturally knew that this array was good stuff. Even though Juxia was sitting beside Fairy Hong Xia with her eyes closed, looking calm on the surface, her heart was filled with an avalanche of emotions. Although Xiao Hua knew how to refine pills, he did not know the difficulty of refining the first-grade flying shadow pill, let alone Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. But Juxia knew. She had collected so many materials for the flying shadow pill in her storage bag, so why was she still unable to refine the flying shadow pill? The fundamental reason was that she did not trust the alchemists she knew. In other words, as far as she knew, there were not many alchemists who could refine the flying shadow pill. But this Xiao Hua, this cultivator from the Imperial Thunder sect whom she met for the first time, actually refined it so easily. Moreover, it was a first-grade spirit pill. In fact, when she told Xiao Hua about the flying shadow pill, Juxia's original intention was to take out the pill formula for the non-grade flying shadow pill. She did not plan to tell him about the remaining 6th-grade pills. But it was also at that moment, in a flash, she felt that Xiao Hua was the person she was looking for, the person who could help her, who might be able to fulfill her wish. Or perhaps, she was also testing Xiao Hua. If she could not fulfill her wish, how could Xiao Hua help her complete such a difficult task? Although it seemed that Juxia trusted Xiao Hua very much and told him everything, she did not hold back the pill formula for the flying shadow pill and even took out the spirit blood she had painstakingly collected. But in her heart, she really did not have any confidence. She did not have any confidence at all. And it wasn't that she didn't want to see how Xiao Hua refined pills, and it wasn't that she didn't want to peek at Xiao Hua's progress in refining pills, but she knew that at this time, she could only wait. She could only obtain Xiao Hua's trust without arousing his suspicion and complete her important task. That task, she felt that it was almost impossible for her to complete. Just as Juxia's thoughts were running wild, an inexplicable palpitation suddenly appeared in her heart. At the same time, a familiar aura appeared. Star power. Juxia almost did not need to open her eyes. That wild, tyrannical, and incomparably pure star power aura seeped into her body through this not far distance. Xiao Hua can really draw the power of the outer realm's origin stars. Juxia's heart was beating wildly. He, who exactly is he? Even at this moment, Juxia still didn't dare to pry into Xiao Hua's actions in the cave. Xiao Hua had given her too many surprises, and these surprises didn't seem like they should be counted as surprises. Perhaps, other than this extremely difficult matter in front of me, should also be able to land on him. Juxia slightly opened her eyes and looked at Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao in the distance, who did not know what was going on at all, and thought to herself. At the same time, the 5-colored brilliance in Juxia's eyes appeared again. Outside the cave where Xiao Hua was, a faintly discernible brilliance was like a pillar of light that pierced the sky. It was the endless star power that fell into Xiao Hua's body. Juxia only took a glance and hurriedly closed her eyes. Her eyes returned to their original state. It's a pity. Although Xiao Hua has such a remarkable ability, his cultivation is really too weak. The difficult task in front of me, he might not be able to complete it, let alone my matter. Juxia sighed slightly. I still have to wait. Then, Juxia restrained her thoughts, as if she did not see the starlight at all. She did not dare to spy on what kind of remarkable ability Xiaohua was using in the cave. But if Juxia really did spy on him, she was afraid. Her jaw would drop to the ground. -11. Chapter 2799. This was because Xiaohua wasn't doing anything. He was even taking a nap with his eyes closed. The spirit blood of a second-grade flying shadow pill was a snow swallow, a spiritual bird that was 6 feet long. Although this spiritual bird was twice the size of a swift sparrow, its rebellious and struggling power was twice as strong. Xiaohua used his soul thread to drag the blood shadow of the snow swallow into the pill furnace. Seeing the blood shadow of the snow swallow fuse with the pill liquid, Xiaohua was a little confused. Juxia, where did this spirit blood come from? Why is every drop of spirit blood so powerful? When little white dragon's soul was sent into the mysterious dark cloud, it didn't seem to be so strenuous. I've already cultivated to the clear spirit sky. If I were still in the surrounding chi sky, I'm afraid I wouldn't even be able to refine a first-grade spirit pill. The time to condense the pill was similar to the first time. It also took a total of 47 days to complete. The second-grade flying shadow pill was smaller than the first-grade flying shadow pill, but the shadow of the snow swallow was twice as big. Of course, the pattern on the flying shadow pill was also a snow swallow, and its color was a little thicker than blood. Congratulations, Xiaohua. Just after Xiaohua took the pill, Juxia's smiling voice appeared outside the cave. Xiaohua proudly handed over the second-grade flying shadow pill and said with a smile, "Take a look. Does this spirit pill have star power?" Okay. Juxia took it, and her eyes flashed with 5 colors. She said happily, "This time there is star power. Xiaohua, how did you do it?" Hee, this is my private matter. Miss Juxia, please don't blame me." Xiaohua smiled but didn't answer. Then, he clapped his hands and said, "This is a first-grade flying shadow pill. Please accept it." All right. Juxia stretched out his hand and received it. At the same time, he returned the flying shadow pill to Xiaohua. "Let's go." Xiaohua took the second-grade flying shadow pill and waved his hand. "Please wake Hongxia up and let her take this spirit pill." Oh. Juxia was slightly surprised. You're not going to refine the third-grade flying shadow pill?" "No." Xiaohua shook his head and said, "This second-grade flying shadow pill is already troublesome to refine. I'm afraid that the third-grade flying shadow pill will fail. This Xiao's spirit grass is simple, but Mrs. Spirit Blood is very precious." "Don't be scared. Don't be scared." Juxia waved her hand and said, "Although this third-grade cold goose spirit blood is precious, it can be refined into a flying shadow pill. It is perfectly compatible with Big Sister's Ice Phoenix bloodline. The effect was several times better than the snow swallow. Besides, I still want the second-grade spirit pill with star power that you just refined. You don't disappoint me in Big Sister." This, Xiaohua bitterly smiled and said, "This Xiao really feels that it won't be easy to refine a third-grade spirit pill. There's a 70% chance that this cold goose spirit blood will be wasted." Hee, since you have 30% confidence, why not give it a try?" Juxia smiled. "I think you can do it. I have 99% confidence in you." Seeing that Xiaohua was hesitating, Juxia thought for a moment and said, "How about this? I'll wake her up now and teach her the secret technique. If you're able to refine a third-grade spirit pill, give it to Big Sister on the day it's completed. Otherwise, let Big Sister take this second-grade spirit pill. It won't delay Big Sister's recovery. What do you think?" Xiaohua was most afraid of persuasion. After thinking for a moment, he nodded and said, "All right, since you're not afraid that I'll spoil the flying shadow pill, what do I have to be afraid of?" "Good. Thank you for your trouble." Juxia smiled and nodded. She looked deeply at Xiaohua and turned around to wake Fairy Hongxia without hesitation. Juxia walked to the side of Fairy Hongxia with her back facing Xiaohua. Her eyes once again shone with the 5-colored brilliance. Her right hand tapped on her forehead and pointed at Fairy Hongxia. "Quick! A ray of five-colored brilliance landed on Fairy Hong Xia's forehead. Ah! Fairy Hong Xia moved slightly, and a moan could be heard. Hong Xia. Xiao Hua was too embarrassed to call Fairy Hong Xia his wife in front of everyone. He called out in a low voice and walked over. Xiao Hua, Fairy Hong Xia straightened her body. Her entire body was aching, and she felt an indescribable discomfort. There was an indescribable feeling between her bones. However, just as she called out to Xiao Hua, her gaze landed on Juxia's face. Big sister, Juxia smiled and didn't bow. She said, "My name is Juxia. I've long heard of the rinsing flower sect's Fairy Hong Xia's beautiful name. Today, I finally have the chance to meet you. You truly live up to your name. Little sister is impressed." Juxia. Before Fairy Hong Xia fainted, she only saw Xiao Hua walking over on lightning. At that time, she only had Xiao Hua in her eyes. Even if Juxia did appear, she might not even be worthy of her attention. But now, when she woke up, she saw such a beautiful woman in front of her. She even called her big sister. How could she not be vigilant? Hee, Hong Xia, this is a fellow cultivator I met when I was lost in the Huan country. When Xiao Hua heard Fairy Hong Xia's unfriendly tone, how could he not know what she was thinking? He hurriedly explained, Juxia has the ability to predict the future. I came to the Sword Edge Mountain under her suggestion. Otherwise, I would still be on my way to Drifting Cloud Lake. Oh, Fairy Hong Xia frowned. Juxia looked very young, but her youthful vigor couldn't be concealed. When Fairy Hong Xia first saw Juxia, her heart skipped a beat. It was an indescribable feeling. This feeling made her reject Juxia, but at the same time, she was slightly attracted to her. When she heard Xiao Hua say that Juxia had an inconceivable ability, how could she not think about it? Furthermore, those 6 illusory swordsmen were killed by Miss Juxia. Xiao Hua continued, if not for her, I wouldn't have been able to kill those 6 grade 3 illusory swordsmen. Also, Xiao Hua continued, your Dharma body collapsed and your elemental energy was greatly damaged. Miss Juxia took out her pill formula and secret technique to treat your injuries. I am preparing to refine the flying shadow pill. At this point, Xiao Hua was stunned. It seemed that he didn't need to explain so much. Wouldn't the more he explained, the more suspicious Fairy Hong Xia would be? Why would he feel guilty for no reason? Oh, so it's like this. Many thanks, fellow Taoist Juxia. Fairy Hong Xia's face was expressionless as she struggled to get up to thank Juxia. Elder sister, look at you. Your body hasn't recovered yet. There's no need to be so polite. Juxia hurriedly supported Fairy Hong Xia and said with a smile, little sister originally wanted to ask Xiao Hua for help. Naturally, I had to do something for him first. Furthermore, elder sister is a peerless talent and a natural beauty. You are the leader of all the girls. Even if little sister isn't a man, I wouldn't be willing to let anything happen to elder sister. Little sister is doing something for elder sister. How could those stinky men understand? Fairy Hong Xia was a little embarrassed by Juxia's words. She said in a low voice, little sister's looks are 10 times better than elder sister's, and your temperament is 100 times better than elder sister's. Although you haven't grown up yet, you are already so dazzling. If you become an adult in the future, won't you be a charming beauty? Elder sister can't compare to you, ah. The person elder sister is talking about, could it be elder sister? Juxia smiled as she glanced at Xiao Hua and said, only someone with elder sister's looks would have such a reputation. Huan Hua sect's Fairy Hong Xia is extremely famous in the Cultivation 3 Kingdoms. Little sister has never heard of anyone who can compare to elder sister, ah. I'm afraid that only an intelligent woman like elder sister can match up to a cultivator like Xiao Hua. I'm afraid that Xiao Hua wouldn't even look at others, ah. Elder sister, you don't know how anxious Xiao Hua's been these few days. Juxia's voice grew softer, but Fairy Hong Xia's laughter grew louder. The two of them were even whispering to each other. How? You don't know this, but the Imperial Thunder Sect has a person who enjoys the benefits of being in a favorable position. Fairy Hong Xia's words were also transmitted over. Xiao Hua stood by the side in a daze, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What are you talking about, ah? Obviously, just a moment ago they were still on guard. How come in the blink of an eye? It's like they have known each other for a long time. Furthermore, is this the time to whisper? Shouldn't we be discussing the matter of healing her injuries first? While Xiaohua was feeling helpless, his heart became alert again. This Juxia. Her methods are really impressive. Although Fairy Hong Xia's injuries have not healed and her state of mind is somewhat lacking, but ordinary people would not be able to gain her trust so easily. This Juxia's bewitching technique is really powerful. Not only was Xiaohua stunned, even Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao were watching from the side, speechless. They were the same as Xiaohua. Although they were bewitched by Juxia's beauty, they were still alert in their hearts. They had never spoken to someone so sincerely the moment they met. Who would have thought that after Fairy Hong Xia woke up, she would be so intimate with Juxia with just a few words, far surpassing their expectations? Darling Xiaohua looked at Li Zongbao, not knowing how to remind him or find the time to transmit a message. Fairy Hong Xia turned her head and smiled. You should go and refine the pills. Little sister Juxia has already told me just now. My future cultivation will depend on darling Zhao's hard work. Also, little sister Juxia is about to teach me the secret technique of Dharmakaya cultivation. You don't have to worry. Once I fully understand the secret technique, your pills will also be refined. Isn't that the best of both worlds? Fairy Hong Xia emphasized the best of both worlds very much, and even winked at Xiaohua. Yes, Xiaohua's face was a little red, thinking that Fairy Hong Xia mentioned the best of both worlds to imply that he already knew Juxia. After hesitating for a while, he wanted to transmit a message to explain something. But just as he was about to speak, he was suddenly stunned, and then suddenly understood. Of course, who is Fairy Hong Xia? She is a person who is said to be on par with Li Zongbao. Even if she is seriously injured, how can she not be alert? But when Fairy Hong Xia heard that Juxia helped Xiaohua when he killed the 6 illusory swords, she naturally had the thought of befriending her. Both sides are Dao sect cultivators, and they met in Huan country. No matter what her motive was, as long as they could support each other, she would be a strong ally. To Fairy Hong Xia and the rest, to Juxia, it was a good thing. This is what Fairy Hong Xia meant by the best of both worlds. How is this the best of both worlds in Xiaohua's little abacus? Female cultivators, not to mention who they are, which one of them is not beautiful on the outside and intelligent on the inside? -11. Chapter 2800. I'll have to trouble Miss Juxia to take care of Hong Xia. The trace of doubt on Xiaohua's face was also swept away. He laughed loudly and turned around to enter the cave. Li Zongbao was naturally stunned, but after a little calculation, he roughly understood. He frowned and found a place to sit down and meditate alone. On the other hand, Xiao Mao was looking at this and that. He was really puzzled. Fairy Hong Xia and Juxia were whispering to each other. He wanted to ask Li Zongbao about it, but Li Zongbao ignored him. Thus, he could only helplessly sit cross-legged at the entrance of the cave, protecting Xiaohua. A few days later, a medicinal fragrance wafted from the entrance of the cave. This medicinal fragrance wafted for dozens of days. On this day, everyone closed their eyes to comprehend their own cultivation methods. Suddenly, a loud and clear cry of a wild goose sounded from within the cave. That sound was very arrogant, but at the same time, it was also very desolate. Juxia heard the sound and opened her eyes. She looked at the cave and frowned slightly. This cry of a wild goose was obviously different from the previous 2 times. Others may not have heard it, but she heard it clearly. Sister, Fairy Hong Xia naturally opened her eyes and was very sensitive to Juxia's expression. She whispered, "Is Xiaohua all right?" I'm afraid there is something wrong." Juxia didn't hide anything and said in a low voice, "Just now, Xiaohua already said that when he was refining the 2nd-grade spirit pill, he was already somewhat unable to do it. However, in order to give Big Sister a higher-grade 3rd-grade spirit pill, he still insisted on refining a 3rd spirit pill. I couldn't stop him even if I wanted to. Sister is really lucky to meet such a deeply affectionate Dao companion like Xiaohua. However, Sister doesn't have to worry. The worst-case scenario is that he will waste a spirit pill. Nothing will happen to Xiaohua. Sigh, that's just how he is." Fairy Hongxia's eyes were filled with tenderness. If he can give others 10 points, he will definitely not give 9 points. Not just me, it's the same for others. After a long time, sister will know. Hee, how can I stay with sister and Xiaohua for long? After Xiaohua helps Mimi once, Mimi will leave this place. When will Mimi be able to see Jiejier in the future? Mimi doesn't even know. Juxia giggled. However, after chatting with elder sister for so many days, younger sister is really envious of elder sister and Xiaohua's feelings. I like being together with elder sister even more. Then, Juxia's eyes became blurry as if she was looking into the distance. She muttered, if only my younger sister had such an elder sister. How great would that be? Seeing Juxia's pitiful expression, Fairy Hongxia's heart could not help but ache. She even blurted out, if you don't mind, it would be good for us to become sworn sisters. Ah? Really? Juxia's face immediately revealed a look of surprise. That kind of surprise was like the birth of a bright moon in the night sky, making Fairy Hongxia's heart clear up again. Of course, Fairy Hongxia said proudly, if those stinky men can become sworn brothers, why can't we women do the same? Good. Juxia did not allow Fairy Hongxia to continue speaking. She bowed and said, little sister Juxia greets big sister Hongxia. Little sister, please rise. Fairy Hongxia smiled as she helped Juxia up. Becoming sworn sisters is not only that, we also have to report it to the heavens and earth, and let the heavens and earth bear witness for us. I will listen to elder sister's instructions. Juxia's face turned red. Little sister does not know much about this. Li Zongbao naturally heard the cries of the winter geese in the cave. However, when he opened his eyes, he saw that it was Fairy Hongxia and Juxia who were becoming sworn sisters. He did not know what to say. The development of this matter was far beyond his imagination. It was even a little inconceivable. If only Juxia was here, how great would that be? Li Zongbao thought to himself for no reason. Xiaohua was not as unaffected as Juxia had said. The shadow of the winter geese was at least 20 feet tall, and it covered the cave that was opened temporarily. Just as Xiaohua had expected, the moment the shadow of the winter geese was formed, a cold aura mixed with a faint savage aura seeped out from the shadow, enveloping the entire cave. Furthermore, the shadow of the winter geese flapped its wings, and a surge of energy carried the drop of blood, as if it was about to fly out of the cave above the geese's head. Xiaohua's magic power surged, and he tried his best to control the spiritual fire, but he was unable to control the shadow. Xiaohua had already released over 1,000 strands of spirit thread, firmly entangling the shadow. However, he was still unable to stop the shadow from struggling. Sigh. If the 3rd grade flying shadow pill is so difficult to refine, then what about the 6th grade? What about the 9th grade? Xiaohua laughed bitterly. Looks like this 3rd batch of flying shadow pill is going to be wasted. It's really a pity for the 3rd drop of spirit blood. After all, Xiaohua was controlling the spiritual fire to use the demon realm's blood fusion technique, and his control was not too skillful. Although the shadow of the winter geese could not really escape from the capital star's formation, the fusion of the pill was at this moment. After this moment, the flying shadow pill would be wasted, and the spirit blood of the winter geese would also be wasted. Little yellow? Little white? Xiaohua thought for a moment and felt that it was inappropriate. Little white was still weak and could not come out, and little yellow could only eat. He had never seen it spit out before. Moreover, there was Juxia outside the cave, so how could Xiaohua expose these secrets in front of her? Just as Xiaohua was about to give up, his gaze fell on the drop of blood that was about to turn into green smoke under the shadow of the winter geese. Oh, can I give it a try? Xiaohua was a little hesitant, but soon after, he opened his mouth and a drop of essence blood flew out and landed right beside the remnant blood. In almost an instant, the other spiritual flame also flew out from Xiaohua's hand and charged into the essence blood. Within the cave, the cry of the winter geese had been heard for the umpteenth time. Not only did the cry not have a trace of weakness, it was even louder than before, as if the shadow of the winter geese had not been consumed much in the past few days. Little sister. What? is Xiaohua doing? Fairy Hong Xia held Zhu Xia's small, boneless hand and asked in a low voice. Hee hee, big sister. Why don't you use your spiritual sense to see for yourself? Zhu Xia said with a smile. There are no restrictions in his cave. That won't do. Fairy Hong Xia shook her head. This is Xiaohua's secret, and if I use my spiritual sense to check, it might affect his pill refining. Big sister is right. Zhu Xia nodded with a smile. Little sister has not checked before, and I don't know how to refine pills, so I don't know what he is doing. But thinking about it, Xiaohua is trying to subdue the spiritual bird's blood and send it into the flying shadow pill. The previous 2 times. It didn't take this long, right? Fairy Hong Xia was a little worried. In the previous 2 times, it was done in one go. Zhu Xia nodded. I'm afraid there is a problem this time. Now that the winter geese have been crying for a few days, the medicinal liquid in the cauldron must have reached its limit. If the cry of the geese is still there, this cauldron of pills will be wasted. Hee hee, Xiaohua is going to feel heartache now. Fairy Hong Xia laughed when she heard that Xiaohua was not in any danger. Big sister, this is the spiritual blood that little sister has been collecting for a long time. Little sister's heart is aching. Zhu Xia rebuked. Big sister only has Xiaohua in your heart. You don't care about little sister. Good, good. Fairy Hong Xia laughed. When there is a chance in the future, I will ask Xiaohua to make more for you. Hee hee, good. This is what big sister said. I will tell Xiaohua later. Zhu Xia laughed and almost jumped up. Where was the awe-inspiring aura that she had when she killed 5 illusory swords with a single sentence? Seeing how happy Zhu Xia was, Fairy Hong Xia was also happy in her heart, and a smile appeared on her face. Who wouldn't like such a cute little sister like Zhu Xia? Gee, at this moment, the winter geese cried out in grief. It was incomparably mournful. Following that, there was a series of flustered cries. Following that, there was a buzzing sound from the cauldron. Everything returned to silence. Although Fairy Hong Xia did not know how to refine pills, when she heard the commotion, her heart was at ease. A strange expression appeared on Zhu Xia's face. This was a rarely seen expression on her face. Furthermore, ever since she met Xiaohua, this expression had appeared many times. However, this strange expression disappeared in a flash, and a smile appeared on her face again. Nonsense. If this grade 3 flying shadow pill was refined, then wouldn't the grade 2 flying shadow pill be hers? No matter what angle she looked at it from, there was no way she would not want to refine this grade 3 pill. After another 9 days, a golden light shot up into the sky from within the cave and pierced through the mountain peak. After that, it shot up into the sky from the peak and did not stop for a long time. Within the cave, a few clear sounds could be heard, as though a water buffalo was sneezing. Suddenly, Xiaohua chanted a mantra and all the golden light disappeared. A strong medicinal fragrance rushed out and Xiaohua appeared at the entrance of the cave with a smile on his face. Darling Xiao, Fairy Hong Xia walked over quickly. Her steps were light and light. Although she might not be able to use her flying technique, her recovery over the past few days could already be estimated. This is for you. Xiaohua stretched out his hand. It was not the same as before where it was just a spiritual pill. Instead, it was a jade box with a yellow talisman pasted on it. I heard from little sister Zhu Xia that this spiritual pill was something that you insisted on refining. Fairy Hong Xia said with heartache, actually, the previous one was enough. Why did you have to waste your spiritual energy? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. Following which, he saw Zhu Xia sticking out her tongue from behind Fairy Hong Xia. Her scarlet tongue was very eye-catching. This Zhu Xia is really good at reading people's expressions, Xiaohua praised. Naturally, he could not deny it. He looked at Fairy Hong Xia and said, I did not take good care of you and caused you to be injured. Naturally, I have to do my best to help you recover. This grade 3 flying shadow pill is very beneficial to your future cultivation. How can I let it go? Darling Xiao, you are the best. Fairy Hong Xia said while biting her cherry lips. Brother-in-law. Zhu Xia did not miss the opportunity to shout. Quickly let me see the pill image of this grade 3 flying shadow pill. Brother-in-law? Xiaohua was stunned. -11. Chapter 2801. Hee. Fairy Hong Xia pursed her lips and smiled. I have already become sisters with Ju Xia. Naturally, she has to call you brother-in-law. Are you a little disappointed? Naturally, the last sentence was already similar to a voice transmission. How could I? Xiaohua did not pay attention and almost let it slip. Halfway through, he immediately changed his words and said, Great. This is the best thing that has happened to me since I entered Huan country. Congratulations, Red Cloud. Xiaohua had an indescribable feeling in his heart. The mysterious Ju Xia, actually called him brother-in-law. Quickly give me the pill, brother-in-law. Ju Xia was like a lively child as she jumped in front of Xiaohua and stretched out her hand to ask for it. Here, Xiaohua could only pass the jade box to Ju Xia first. He then turned his head and asked, Red Cloud, the secret technique that Ju Xia gave you, have you comprehended it? Previously I comprehended the second-grade flying shadow technique. Fairy Hong Xia's face had a worried expression, but Xiaohua actually refined the third-grade flying shadow pill. I have no choice but to comprehend the third-grade flying shadow technique again. Xiaohua is making things difficult for me. Seeing that Fairy Hong Xia was actually so cute, Xiaohua's heart was about to melt. He stretched out his hand, wanting to hold her hand. However, thinking that Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao were still at the side, he was afraid that Fairy Hong Xia would be shy. Who knew that when Fairy Hong Xia raised her hand, she would hold Xiaohua's hand. Her warm and soft hand was really Fairy Hong Xia's sweetheart. Xiaohua's hand tightened as if he had grabbed onto happiness. The hard work of the past 100 days had already disappeared along with the golden light and the medicinal fragrance from earlier. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao did not pay attention to Fairy Hong Xia and Xiaohua at all. Their gazes were the same as Ju Xia's, landing on the jade box. Inside the jade box was a golden pill with a pigeon egg inside. There was a layer of faint golden brilliance on it. That brilliance was so dazzling that it was like the yellow sun on the horizon. And this golden brilliance was emitted from the faint golden threads within the pill. In addition to the golden threads, the surface of the golden core was covered in fine runes, just like the previous 2 flying shadow pills. These runes formed the image of a cold goose. As the 5-colored brilliance flashed in Jiu Xia's eyes, an indescribable expression appeared on his face. There was even a hint of greed in his expression, or perhaps it was a longing that accompanied it. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao were purely amateurs. They stared at it for a long time, but other than the golden light in their eyes, they didn't know what was so special about it. Xiao, brother-in-law. Ju Xia only opened her mouth after a long while. She stuck out her thumb and said, I don't know how to praise you. It seems like I can only give you don't know anything other than giving birth. I really can't think of any other title in this world that I can give you. Hee. Fairy Hong Xia's face was slightly red. She pinched Xiaohua with one hand and covered her mouth with the other to laugh. Cough, cough, low-key. Xiaohua coughed twice and said, It's best not to use this shocking title. Otherwise, many cultivators won't have the face to appear in the cultivation world. Ha ha ha, Ju Xia laughed happily. Her laughter flowed like a mountain, spring into everyone's hearts. Everyone was infected, and an indescribable joy was born from the bottom of their hearts. Even Li Zongbao revealed a rare smile. Sister, brother-in-law is really interesting. Ju Xia almost wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. His third-grade flying shadow pill's quality has long surpassed the third grade. However, because it doesn't have Chao Ying's spirit blood, it can't reach the 4th grade. However, the mysterious golden thread inside has already raised this pill to the outer grade. Outer grade? Xiaohua was also happy in his heart. However, after hearing Ju Xia's evaluation of his pill, Xiaohua was a bit confused. The outer grade is beyond the evaluation of the 9th grade. Ju Xia smiled and said, just like the Wucang pill and the 2nd grade flying shadow pill that brother-in-law refined earlier, they can all be classified as outer grade. However, the grades of these pills are too low, so there isn't any special distinction. How many spirit stones are these outer grade and inner grade spirit pills worth? Xiaohua's heart calmed down and he revealed the face of a miser. Spirit stones? Juxia asked with a smile that wasn't a smile. If little sister is willing to pay spirit stones, would brother-in-law be willing to sell this outer-grade golden pill to little sister? Why is it impossible? Xiaohua originally wanted to say, how is it possible? But he immediately changed his words. Hee, only an alchemy grandmaster like brother-in-law can have such boldness. Juxia praised again. This inner-grade pill or outer-grade pill is a rare treasure. Who would take it out to trade without permission? Brother-in-law, have you ever seen a first-grade pill in the auction of the 3 kingdoms of cultivation? I really haven't. Xiaohua scratched his head and said doubtfully, furthermore, this Xiao seems to have never heard of pills being divided into 9 grades. Juxia did not answer his question but nodded and said, that's right. Can spirit stones be used to exchange for pills that don't even appear in the auction? Then without explaining, he turned to Fairy Hongxia and said, Sister, you're lucky. With this outer-grade flying shadow pill, you can practice the 3rd-grade flying shadow technique. This avatar will definitely be famous in Dawn Rain continent in the future. But, as you said, this avatar needs to be reforged. Using Xiantian True Water to forge an Ice Phoenix avatar is a bit too difficult. Fairy Hongxia looked at the golden pill and said hesitantly, Darling Xiao, you refine this golden pill with great difficulty. Don't waste it. Hee, with brother-in-law here, what are you afraid of? Juxia chuckled and there was a mischievous look in that smile. Lone Yin does not give birth. Lone Yang does not grow. Brother-in-law's name of terrifying phoenix is not for nothing, right? Fairy Hongxia's face turned red. She did not expect Juxia to be able to see through this. Xiaohua's face also turned red. Looking at the sky and the ground, Li Zongbao pointed to a corner in the distance and said to Xiao Mao, Junior brother Xiao, there seems to be something wrong with the Du Tian star array. You and I have been studying the array for a long time. Let's go and take a look. All right. Xiao Mao's face was also serious as he followed Li Zongbao. That's sister. Fairy Hongxia was a bit embarrassed, but she had to say it now. Darling Zhao's phoenix avatar disappeared? How can an avatar disappear? Once the avatar is activated, if it is forced to dissipate, to the cultivator's cultivation that, brother-in-law, you can still stand here? Juxia's smile froze. She seemed to have never heard of an avatar disappearing. Cough, cough, that is indeed the case. Xiaohua could not explain in detail and said softly, my avatar seems to have fallen into the void. Amazing. Brother-in-law, you are really amazing. Juxia was speechless and gave him a thumbs up helplessly. Xiaohua was able to throw an avatar into the void. This was probably the first time Juxia had seen someone like that. Let's see if there is any other way first. Xiaohua smacked his lips and urged, there is indeed a way. Juxia smiled bitterly and said, the fusion of yin and yang is the best way to create an avatar. Sister, you have the innate primordial water here, so you must have the innate primordial fire. The best way to create the innate primordial fire is the best. That is why I thought of. At this point, Juxia shut up, because Xiaohua was holding a golden magic bottle in which the innate primordial fire was flickering. Brother-in-law, do you have any other innate items? Juxia was a bit speechless. The more innate items of the 5 elements in this avatar, the better. Oh, Xiaohua raised his hand again and took out a ball of innate gold qi. He said embarrassedly, I only have these 3, innate primordial wood and innate primordial earth. I really don't have any. Please excuse me. AI. Juxia sighed and shook her head. I finally understand. How could I forget about this? You should have it. After he finished speaking, he actually looked at Xiaohua with a profound look. Xiaohua was already used to Juxia's ability to predict the future. He did not pay attention to her gaze. Who knew that Juxia would raise her hand again and said, take out your innate gold mother and innate jellyfish and let sister use them. Oh, okay. Xiaohua hesitated and was about to take them out. Sister is really amazing. Fairy Hongxia saw Xiaohua nodding. How could she not know that Xiaohua actually had these things that she had never thought of before? She was really impressed by Juxia's ability to predict the future. Her eyes flashed with astonishment as she said, Xiaohua has never mentioned these things to me before. You actually said it out loud. If I did not hear you say that you have such talent, I would have thought that Xiao Hua had told you before. Xiao Hua did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said with a bitter face, "These things are useless to you. Why would I tell you? It is even more impossible for me to tell Juxia." Hee hee. Fairy Hongxia laughed and said, "This concubine knows. It is all because Juxia's ability is amazing." But Juxia waved her hand as if she did not have any intention of being complacent. She said, "Brother-in-law, please don't." "Oh, what do you want now?" Xiao Hua hurriedly said, "I do not have any innate fire, mother. Even if you beat me to death, I would not be able to take it out." Hee hee, brother-in-law, do not be anxious. Juxia did not have any intention of coveting Xiao Hua's innate items. She explained, "The Tao of the 5 elements are mutually reinforcing and restraining each other. This is even more so for the innate 5 elements. Innate jellyfish and innate gold mother can produce innate primordial water and innate gold qi. When these two things mutually reinforce each other, they can produce a bit of innate true wood. Brother-in-law also has innate true fire. When combined with innate gold mother, you can forcefully produce a bit of innate true earth. Sister's Dharma body only needs to be constructed with the innate 5 elements. It does not need innate fire, mother." -11. Chapter 2802. Oh, I understand now. Xiao Hua nods his head, but then he is suddenly shocked and says anxiously, This kind of Dharma body, doesn't that mean it has the innate 5 elements? Is that still a true blood Dharma body?" Hee hee, of course not. Juxia smiles like a crescent moon. "This should be an innate spiritual body." Innate spiritual body? Xiao Hua blinks his eyes and says in confusion, "This name sounds very powerful, but what is so powerful about it? As for the specifics, I am not sure myself." At this moment, Juxia does not say anything, as if she is trying to whet Xiao Hua's appetite. "All I know is that this spiritual body can cultivate by itself. If there is a coincidence, just like your Dharma body, it can enter the void and be separated from sister's body. Who knows, it might be another external incarnation." This, so powerful. Xiao Hua and Fairy Hongxia are both wild with joy. Is there still a need to say? Even if this spiritual body Dharma body cannot be separated from the body, if this spiritual body can cultivate in the future, wouldn't it be another Fairy Hongxia? In the future, if they were to fight with others, wouldn't the two of them fight together? "Sister, you really have a good family background, right?" Fairy Hongxia is really full of admiration for Juxia. She had already asked about Juxia's background, but Juxia did not say anything. Fairy Hongxia thought for a long time, but still could not think of Juxia's background. Now it seems that Juxia might be a direct disciple of one of the big sects in the cultivation world. Hee hee, it's just so. Juxia smiles, compared to the so-called, "I know everything except giving birth." At this point, Juxia is stunned. It seems that only male cultivators can say such words. For a girl to say such words, it is extremely inappropriate. Ha ha ha, Xiao Hua rarely sees Juxia's awkwardness and laughs. "Sister," Juxia tugs on Fairy Hongxia's sleeve, unwilling to let it go. Cough cough, Fairy Hongxia glares at Xiao Hua and rebukes. "Sister is still underage. Look at how much she has learned from you." Sweat, Xiao Hua curls his lips. "If Juxia is underage, I am afraid that I am still a child." Hee hee, let's go, sister. Sister, I will first tell sister the secret technique to refine the spiritual body Dharma body. Let those stinky men enjoy the wind outside. Juxia giggled as she pulled Fairy Hongxia into the cave, leaving the two beautiful figures in Xiao Hua's line of sight. Junior brother Xiao Hua heard Li Zhongbao's voice transmission beside his ear. This Juxia is full of oddities. Junior sister being so intimate with her. I'm afraid it's inappropriate. Sigh. Xiao Hua walked towards the two people and said with a bitter smile, "What can we do? Perhaps Hongxia has her own plans. She wasn't a simple-minded person, so she would just treat it as if nothing had happened. Furthermore, even if Hongxia falls into Juxia's trap, what can you and I do? This Juxia is unfathomable. Looks like this little girl doesn't have any bad intentions." Although Xiao Mao can't hear the two's voice transmission, Seeing Li Zongbao's seriousness and Xiaohua's helplessness, he immediately understands that Li Zongbao is telling Xiaohua the same thing that he has nagged him countless times. What do you know? Xiaohua glares at Xiao Mao. Your eyeballs are about to fall to the ground. Can you tell that she has any bad intentions? This. Xiao Mao actually blushes. Looks like Xiaohua is right. Senior brother, can you and Xiao Mao understand the array? If there is anything you don't understand, just say it. Xiaohua looks at the cave and asks. Li Zongbao's face shows a trace of awkwardness. Xiao Mao hurriedly says, of course there is a lot that I don't understand. This is the capital star array. How can it be compared to an ordinary array? Big brother, quickly explain it to me. Senior brother Li can also tell me what you have learned. Then, the three brothers hid outside the cave and explained the capital star array in detail. Although the two of them were a little confused, it was 100 times better than trying to figure it out by themselves. Seeing that Li Zongbao, the number one person under the golden core stage, doesn't understand the array, Xiaohua is somewhat pensive. This capital star array in his heart is like a piece of cake, as if he has been comprehending it for a long time. Judging himself by others, Xiaohua understands that his aptitude is not inferior to Li Zongbao's, or his cultivation time is not shorter than Li Zongbao's. But, during the Imperial Thunder Sect's apprenticeship test, the Bone Age test, didn't it show that I am only 20 years old? Could it be that the Imperial Thunder Sect spells are not good enough? Xiaohua unconsciously thought of his background. For several days, Fairy Hongxia and Juxia did not come out. Xiaohua knows that the secret technique to condense a spiritual body is definitely not that simple. So, Xiaohua dug 2 more caves at the side. He hid in one of them to refine jade talismans and left the other one for Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. He does not dare to let the 2 of them stand outside in the cold wind. Who would have thought that this wait would take more than 100 days? Xiaohua's technique of refining jade talismans is becoming more and more skillful. He actually managed to refine 2 sets of the hundreds of talismans of the capital star array. Moreover, he refined more than 10 talismans, patching up the flaws of the array. Xiaohua tested it a little. The power of the jade talismans is indeed much stronger than the talismans. Not only is the defensive power 40% stronger, the speed of setting up the array is also more than double. If I recall all the other jade talismans of the capital star array, I won't be afraid of anyone on the Dawn Rain continent with just this array. Xiaohua just thought of this, and he unconsciously felt a slight shock in his heart. Previously, he already had a thought, I can't be careless. The cultivator who sealed this young master must be incomparably powerful. Even with this star array, this young master was still not his opponent. Moreover, I've revealed too much in the Sword Dao battle. Just like what Li Zongbao said, even if I want to hide it, it will not be easy. I'm afraid I have to make other plans. Thinking of this, Xiaohua raised his eyes and looked in the direction of Mount Million Ming. That Jipeng and Qing Xian must have come from Mount Million Ming and then possessed Yin Ming here. How did they come here? Could it be that the teleportation array within the universal shifting token was able to construct a teleportation array? If that's the case, I can use this teleportation array to reach the other side of Mount Million Ming. No matter how high the opponent's cultivation is, he can't do anything to me. But, second senior brother said it very clearly. This teleportation array must not be constructed successfully. Otherwise, Jipeng will be here before I even reach there. Before this young master's enemy makes a move, this young master and second senior martial brother will be killed. Oh, Zhang Luer. Thinking of this, Xiaohua was shocked. This period of time was extremely dangerous. He had thrown Zhang Luer into the space and ignored her. Even if he occasionally took things from the space, Zhang Luer was thrown in an extremely remote place. He did not think of her at all. Fortunately, when Xiaohua's consciousness entered the space, everything about Zhang Luer was still the same. Her face was not thin or fat, and it was still the same. Fortunately, Xiaohua breathed a sigh of relief. If anything happened to Zhang Luer here, I would not be able to explain it to senior sister. Brother-in-law, brother-in-law. At this moment, Juxia's voice came from outside the cave. Alas, my cheap brother-in-law. Xiaohua smiled bitterly, responded, and flew out of the cave. Hee, brother-in-law's hands are not slow. In just a few days, you have actually created 2 cave residences. Juxia laughed. Of course, I can't always stay outside and drink the northwest wind, Xiaohua said unhappily. He looked at the cave and said, how is Hongxia? Can she finish comprehending it? Of course. Juxia smiled, stretched out her hand and said, brother-in-law, you can give me the 2nd-grade flying shadow pill. And Xiaohua clapped his hands and took out the 2nd-grade flying shadow pill and 3 drops of spiritual blood, which he wanted to give to Juxia. I only want the 2nd-grade flying shadow pill. Juxia stretched out her hand, took the pills and said, the rest of them are useless to me. Just take it as a reward. Xiaohua knew that Juxia was not willing to take more benefits from him. He was afraid that if she needed his help in the future, she would not be able to ask for his help. Immediately after, he sent a voice transmission. How confident are you in condensing the spiritual body? If it fails, will it have any effect on Hongxia? Juxia smiled faintly and asked, now that it has come to this, do you have any leeway to retreat? Xiaohua was startled and shook his head slightly. It seems that there is no leeway. Since there is no leeway, what's the use of asking so much? Juxia looked at the cave that Xiaohua flew out of and said, I will go there to rest. You can do whatever you want. I've already told her everything. When Juxia said this, her expression was very serious, as if she did not have any intention of joking. However, when Xiaohua heard the last sentence, his face turned red again. Facing this Juxia who seemed to know everything, Xiaohua felt a lot of pressure in his heart. The secret of dual cultivation, especially the secret between the Phoenix celestial body and the Ice Phoenix celestial body, this Juxia knew. What else did she not know? There is no array in this cave. Even if I do something, it will be like a fishbone stuck in my throat. How can I do whatever I want? However, when Xiaohua walked into the cave, he realized that he was thinking too much. He saw Hongxia Fairy flying in midair. Her body slanted upwards. Her hands were spread open, and her perfectly round legs were slightly raised. Her sharp chin corresponded with her legs, and her posture was very strange. It was as if she was flying, but also as if she was dancing. However, on the surface of Fairy Hongxia's body, there was an inexplicable fluctuation of mana. This fluctuation flowed along the surface of Fairy Hongxia's body, from her chin to her arms, then from her arms to her back, to the tip of her feet, then from the tip of her feet to her lower abdomen, then back to her chin. -11. Chapter 2803. Xiaohua was in such a state, and Fairy Hongxia was even more so. Seeing the sound of the explosion fading and the hurricane calming down, her eyes were filled with exhaustion and joy. At this moment, crack, 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 an extremely discordant sound was heard amidst the explosion, as if something had cracked, and this sound seemed to spread, rapidly spreading to Fairy Hongxia's entire Dharma body. This is bad. Hearing such a sound, how could Xiaohua not know that something had gone wrong? With a sweep of his divine will, he understood that the 5 elements item that had been gradually fusing together was now showing signs of cracks. Obviously, the fusion was not successful. What should we do? Xiaohua frowned. Fairy Hongxia was also panicking, but that panic only lasted for a moment. She stared straight at Xiaohua's face, and her body glowed with a bloody light. Shua. It was as if all the essence blood in her body had been poured into the Ice Phoenix embodiment, and all the crystals were mixed with a trace of blood. My wife is staking it all on this one throw. Xiaohua was anxious. He knew that Fairy Hongxia had started the process of condensing the crystals in advance, but he could not do anything to stop it. He could only nod slightly, as if to encourage Fairy Hongxia. Ga. Another sound rang out, and the Ice Phoenix embodiment danced, like a bloody shadow dancing in the air. The flying shadow secret technique was like this. The bloody light in the crystals trembled along with the Ice Phoenix embodiment, trying its best to condense the 5 elements item. However, the situation was not so optimistic. The power of the bloodline could not withstand it, and with the power of the 5 elements, the cracks of the 5 elements were getting bigger and bigger. Despair. deep and bottomless despair. Whether it was Fairy Hong Xia or Xiao Hua, they both had such a feeling in their hearts. There was a limit to human strength, and this was not a lie. Sometimes, they felt that with just a little bit more, they could succeed. However, this little bit was like a natural moat. Even if there was Ju Xia's mysterious flying shadow pill and flying shadow secret technique, even if there was Xiao Hua's rare innate golden mother and innate jellyfish, even if there was Hong Xia Fairy and Xiao Hua's mutual love, even if the two of them were determined to die together. But all of this could not change the outcome of Fairy Hong Xia's embodiment disappearing. In fact, because of this effort, Fairy Hong Xia's physical body and cultivation would suffer even more serious damage. All their efforts had been for naught. Xiao Hua couldn't help but think of replacing Fairy Hong Xia, even though he knew that it was just wishful thinking. However, to have such thoughts was also good. Fairy Hong Xia could already feel that kind of love from Xiao Hua's anxiety. Fairy Hong Xia opened her mouth, as though she wanted to send a voice transmission. However, not a single word came out. It was as if she knew everything. Xiao Hua also knew. She understood. Xiao Hua also understood. All the words in the world were superfluous. Let's leave it to fate. All of a sudden, Fairy Hong Xia came to a realization. Opportunities were something that could only be chanced upon and not sought after. How could an opportunity that could be created be called an opportunity? Xiao Hua naturally felt the change in Fairy Hong Xia's gaze. Although his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife, he still smiled slightly. The husband follows the wife's lead. This was probably the case. But just as Fairy Hong Xia was about to give up, the golden light within her avatar shone brightly. Fairy Hong Xia was stunned. However, her face immediately lit up with joy. Within the blood-red light, the golden threads from the flying shadow elixir were now emerging from the blood-red light. They entwined around the 5 elemental items. The golden light from the golden threads was so strong that it condensed the 5 elemental items together. Great. Xiao Hua was really ecstatic. He didn't expect that the method he used to refine the flying shadow elixir could still be used now. He looked at Fairy Hong Xia again. Her eyes were tightly shut, and she ignored Xiao Hua. The entire Ice Phoenix avatar began to tremble violently and slowly sank into her physical body. In just a moment, Fairy Hong Xia's pure white body emitted a holy light. Within this light, the hair that had been burnt off earlier slowly grew back. Moreover, within this light, a sparkling and translucent Ice Phoenix celestial body slowly rose up. It slowly spread its wings and slowly covered the entire mountain cave. Caw, the Ice Phoenix let out a soft, gentle cry that sounded both arrogant and as if it was whispering into one's ear. Great. When Xiao Hua heard this cry, he felt as if a huge rock had fallen from his heart. He knew that the most difficult second stage had passed. Although there were still many secret techniques and techniques to refine the spirit body avatar in the future, those were secondary. Sure enough, Fairy Hong Xia no longer maintained her previous posture. Instead, she began to make all sorts of weird movements in the air. At the same time, the Ice Phoenix celestial body was also constantly changing. From time to time, it would let out a phoenix cry as if it was extremely happy. Another 81 days passed, and Xiao Hua didn't leave even a single step. He was always by Fairy Hong Xia's side. Not to mention cultivating, he couldn't even bear to blink his eyes. In the end, the Ice Phoenix avatar suddenly expanded in mid-air and entered Fairy Hong Xia's body. Fairy Hong Xia's face was filled with joy as she threw herself into Xiao Hua's embrace. A feeling of nirvana and rebirth arose in her heart, and it filled Xiao Hua's heart. Xiao Hua hugged Fairy Hong Xia, and his heart was filled with emotions. How could cultivation be done in a day? How could it be smooth sailing? Such a choice between life and death would probably be encountered frequently in the future. When Xiao Hua accompanied Fairy Hong Xia out of the cave, it was already a few days later. The entire valley was empty. Regardless of whether it was Ju Xia, Li Zongbao, or Xiao Mao, they were all hiding in their own caves to cultivate. Even if Xiao Hua didn't set up the capital star array, no one would be able to spy on them. Xiao Hua's spiritual sense swept out, and the 3 of them were startled and walked out of their caves. Congratulations, elder sister. Juxia skipped to Fairy Hong Xia's side, held her hand, and said with a smile, "All right, I have to thank younger sister for your secret technique." Fairy Hong Xia's face also revealed a smile as she said gratefully, "There's no need to thank me." Juxia hurriedly waved her hand. "I'm still waiting for brother-in-law to help me." "Don't worry. If you have any orders, this Xiao will do it." Since Juxia had said it so clearly, how could Xiao Hua not express it? Now that things had developed to this point, even if Xiao Hua didn't want to help, he probably wouldn't be able to decline, right? "Congratulations, senior sister." Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao also came over and congratulated each other. Xiao Mao said in astonishment, "Senior sister, you seem to be a little different from before. Not to mention that you are even more beautiful than before. This aura, this is indescribable." "Is that so?" Fairy Hong Xia was the same as other female cultivators. She loved to hear others say that she was beautiful, and she couldn't help but be happy. "Of course," Juxia said proudly, "elder sister is now a spiritual body. This spiritual body is formed from the Xiantian 5 elements, and the spiritual body is linked to the bloodline. Elder sister's physique and aptitude will also change under the influence of the spiritual body. Right now, this is just the beginning, and it is like changing to a new physical body. In the future, it will be even more different." As she said that, Juxia seemed to intentionally or unintentionally glance at Xiao Hua. Indeed, the speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. Xiao Hua suddenly felt his face heating up. In a new physical body, that is indeed true. Xiao Hua almost wanted to agree. Unfortunately, brother-in-law only has 3 of the 5 elements. If you have all 5 elements, elder sister's spiritual body will be complete. Elder sister's physical body will be even more. Hearing this, Fairy Hong Xia pursed her lips and said, "This is enough. There is no need to talk about complete or not. Without your blessing, elder sister can refine her spiritual body again." Elder sister's state of mind is so good." Juxia laughed. "This state of mind will allow you to go the furthest on the path of cultivation." Fairy Hong Xia laughed. This state of mind was not obtained for free, it was exchanged with her life. "Oh, by the way, elder sister, this flying shadow technique was given to elder sister by me. Elder sister, other than not being able to spread it to others, there is no need to avoid it from your family." Juxia winked at Fairy Hong Xia. Elder sister knows?" Fairy Hong Xia blushed. However, Xiao Hua pursed his lips. He knew what Juxia meant, but he didn't say it out loud. He looked at the sky and said, "Miss Juxia, we have been waiting here for more than a year. Can we go to Million Mountain Ming now?" "If you want to go, then go. I just want to follow elder sister," Juxia said with a smile. "And please keep this capital star formation that belongs to you, so that we can hurry on with our journey." Xiao Hua emphasized the words capital star formation that belongs to you. "All right." Juxia laughed and jumped up. She kept the capital star formation's talismans one by one with great familiarity. It seemed like she had already comprehended it and wanted to keep it. "Sister, how do we go to Million Mountain Ming next?" Fairy Hong Xia knew Juxia's ability and had to ask. "Elder sister, just follow the previous arrangement." Juxia looked at her talismans happily and said casually. She was like a young girl who had obtained her favorite item. She only had her mind on the talismans. Why would she care about others? All right, Fairy Hong Xia was also helpless. She ordered Xiao Mao to bring out the drifting cloud flying ship. Everyone boarded the flying ship. Fairy Hong Xia looked at the direction and led everyone towards the drifting cloud lake. -11.